Naruto. The mother's voice was heard throughout the whole Uzumaki house. You're going to be late for your first day, you know. The woman tapped her foot impatiently against the floor whilst looking up the stairs where the child was slumbering. There was a gasp from upstairs and a lot of noises soon after. The father, who had been sitting next to the red-haired mother this whole time, let out an awkward chuckle, which he quickly regretted as his wife sent daggers from her eyes to him. He began to blush a little and looked back down at his newspaper, regretting reacting to the situation that had seemed to make his wife more furious than her usual self. After a full 5 minutes, their son came downstairs. He moved his hand through his hair and yawned. His appearance could only be explained as untidy. His hair was a mess, his shirt was half tucked in, and his face showed that he wasn't thinking about tidying his appearance up before making his first impression to his peers or teachers. He pouted. You could have woken me up earlier so I wouldn't have to worry about being late, you know. He rubbed his eye tiredly and stretched. His mother sighed and rolled her eyes. She began to neaten her son's appearance. There was no way in hell that Kushina would allow her baby to walk out into the open world with such an appearance. Imagine then judgment from other mothers. If you want to become a ninja, then you can't always be dependent on other people. She ruffled his hair and giggled as he tried to stop her. A sudden contrast in attitude would have shocked anyone who wasn't in the Uzumaki family, but Naruto and Mianto were used to Kushina Uzumaki's emotions and attitudes changing before you can even get used to her current attitude. Naruto put his hands on top of his head. All right, Mom. Let's just eat breakfast." The child jumped onto his chair and started to eat with his family. It didn't take the three too long to finish eating, mostly because of Naruto's growing enthusiasm to go to the academy already with completely contradicted with his late start earlier this morning. Maybe it was partly because of the fear of what his mother might do if he showed little excitement for such an important moment in his life. His father slowly stood up and began to stack up the plates before he smiled at Naruto. "All right, son, let's get going then." The child's eyes widened. "Dad, you're coming as well." It wasn't often Naruto's father wasn't busy with stacks of paperwork. Since he had the title of Hokage, it wasn't easy trying to balance family time along with business time. His mother winked at him. "Yeah, that's right. Minato convinced them to have the day off just for you." Both parents knew that the arrangement made would mean Minato would have to work extra hours in the office, but it would be worthwhile to be part of the memory for Naruto. Naruto blushed a little and smiled widely up at both of his parents. "Gee, great. Let's go." He laughed and ran out of the door. His enthusiasm was certainly not forced anymore. Kushina shouted at her son. "Naruto, don't go running off without us, you know." Naruto kept on running and shouted back, "I'm not 2 years anymore, Mom." The red-haired woman shouted again and ran after him. Minato rubbed the back of his head and thought to himself, he really has the same personality and attitude like Kushina's. They really do have much more in common than just what is inside them both. He slowly walked out after them, locking the door behind him. "Mom, let go of my hand. We're almost at the school, you know." Naruto's mother had caught him before he was even 100 meters away from the door of the house, which he had ran out of foolishly. Now she insisted on holding her child's hand for the rest of the journey. His father, Minato, was walking next to Naruto's left-hand side, and he couldn't help but smile at the situation his son was in right now. As they walked closer and closer to the academy, Kushina kept on showing her love for her child as she kept her grip on his hand. Naruto started to blush. Mom, this is really embarrassing. Please let go of my hand before anyone sees," he begged as he tried to break free of Kushina's motherly grip but failed. Minato saw that his son was acting more awkward and embarrassed with every step they took. "Kushina, Naruto wants to set a good example to those who he'll be calling his classmates. He can't do that whe-. Kushina gave him the same glare he gave him earlier this morning. The glare made Minato slightly shiver. He can't do that whilst he's distracted by his mother's love. Kushina blushed a little and gave in. She let go of her son's hand. Naruto smiled gently, but tried to not act too happy, just in case of enraging his mother. "Thanks, Dad." His father winked down at his son. Naruto was glad his father had helped him when he did, since after another minute or so they arrived at the academy. Minato and Kushina smiled as nostalgia hit them when they saw the building. The woman slowly held her husband's hand and interlocked their fingers as they remembered the memories they shared together at this place. Kushina sighed gently. I hope Naruto will create great memories here like we did, she whispered. Minato smiled at his wife and squeezed her hand. I'm sure he will, sweetheart. He kissed her forehead softly before he looked back at the building. Naruto looked around the place. He saw all the soon-to-be students that he would be with. A boy with black hair caught his eye. He was with his mother, father, and older brother. Naruto blinked a few times. He noticed a white and red symbol on their backs. He had seen that symbol before, but where? It was the symbol of the police force. The symbol also belonged to the Uchiha clan. Naruto slowly found the links and guessed this family was from the Uchiha clan. The young boy with black hair turned around and saw Naruto staring at him as if he were trying to figure something out. What do you want? Naruto quickly shook his head. What? Nothing. Naruto blushed slightly in embarrassment. He thought that the child's first impression of himself was that he was some kind of weirdo. He kicked himself whilst he tried to conceal his humiliation. The older brother of this Uchiha child noticed the voice that his little brother was talking to and turned around. Why, hello, Naruto. It's so good to finally meet you. He gave Uzumaki a warm smile. So you're in the same year as my little brother Sasuke? Naruto looked up at Sasuke's older brother confused. He shook his head before replying. Do I know you? Just at that moment, Minato and Kushina walked over to where their child was. As they did, the older brother of the Uchiha child bowed. Good morning, Lord Fourth. Minato smiled at the gesture. And good morning to you, too, Itachi. Sax's older brother, Itachi, smiled back. Kushina, on the other hand, pinched her son's cheek for what she remarked as a rude way to reply to Itachi. Itachi was one of the most strong and most loyal ambush shinobi that worked for the fourth Hokage, Minato. Because of this, the Uchiha clan has a tight bond with the Namikaze clan and the Uzumaki clan. Itachi and his father are well known in the Uchiha clan for being some of the members who helped form this bond. Itachi looked back down at Naruto and smiled once again. I hope you and Sasuke become good friends at the academy. Naruto smiled widely when he heard the word friend. Yeah, I'm sure we will. Sasuke looked at Naruto up and down. He slowly walked over to where the other children were getting ready to enter the classrooms. Naruto walked after for him. Hey, wait for me, you know. And with that, the two boys left their families as they entered the building of the academy. Naruto woke up the next morning before his parents. He blinked a couple of times before yawning. He tried to stretch, but soon found out that he was unable to. He realized that his mother was cuddling him tightly while she slept. He blushed hard and tried to break free of his mother's grasp, but was unable to. Mom, he whispered, I'll be late for school, you know. To be honest, the boy couldn't care less if he were late or not. He just found the whole situation was giving him great embarrassment. He went to shake his mother, but stopped in his tracks. He remembered the last time he woke his mother from deep sleep. The only word to describe her mood that morning was a word that would get his mouth washed out with soap. Pissed. Naruto shook his head. No, he didn't want that again. He sighed gently and rested his head against his mother's chest. He eventually fell back to sleep. Being on time to school wasn't worth Kushina's pissed mood. The yellow-haired boy only got a couple minutes extra sleep before he was rudely awakened. Naruto, get up. You're not being late for school one more time. Naruto slowly opened his eyes and saw an annoyed Kushina. Crap, did he wake his mother up by accident? He yawned and rubbed his eyes. But Mom, what does it matter if I'm late? Naruto's mother clenched her left hand into a fist and an irritated smile appeared on her face. What does it matter? Some of the Nine Tails chakra leaked out and made her hair defy gravity. IT matters if you want to be a ninja and successfully become a ninja. Naruto blushed and swallowed hard. It was true. He had woken his mother. When he realized what he had done, he didn't take another second to think. He jumped down onto the floor and ran to his room to get ready. Naruto got ready as fast as he could to avoid his mother's mood getting any worse. Whilst Naruto was getting ready, Minato walked out of his and Kushina's room. Kushina was waiting at the front door for Naruto. The fourth Hokage yawned. Is everything all right? What was with the yelling? Kushina blushed gently and smiled at her husband. Oh, no need to worry about it. Everything's fine now. Minato guessed that she had calmed down. He was thankful that she had calmed down because he didn't want to face her if she was still in the worst mood known to mankind. Well, if you say so. He kissed her gently and held her close to him. She giggled and nuzzled his neck. I love you, Minato. Minato grinned and picked her up. He kissed her again. I love you more, my angle. Your mom, Dad. That's gross. Kushina's eyes widened. She didn't know her son had already came downstairs. Minato sighed gently and smiled. He put Kushina down and walked over to Naruto. He ruffled his hair whilst he chuckled. Naruto, you know it's Valentine's Day tomorrow, right? Naruto's father smirked slightly. Have you got someone special a gift for tomorrow? Naruto blushed slightly. The girl he liked only had eyes for the Uchiha kid. Naruto put his hands in his pockets and looked away. No, Valentine's Day is stupid. Kushina glared at her child. Naruto, you better get someone something for tomorrow, you know. Naruto's eyes widened. Why did his mother care so much if he got a gift for someone or not? But he wasn't going to argue with her. He didn't want her in another one of her bad moods. Naruto didn't arrive late to school that day. He arrived just on time. As he sat down on his desk, he began to look around the classroom. Who should he get a gift for? Sakura? She never paid any attention to him since all her time in the academy seemed to be studying or paying attention to Sasuke. She was similar to Sakura. She spent quite a lot of time trying to get the attention of the Uchiha, and she was quite aggressive sometimes. Naruto kept scanning around the classroom and stopped when he noticed a pair of pale purple eyes looking at him. The owner of the eyes blushed hard and quickly looked away. A grin slowly appeared on Naruto's face. Hinata. She was one of the only girls in the class that didn't obsess over Sasuke. Hinata was also the only girl in the class with short hair. Naruto chuckled. He knew who he was getting a gift for tomorrow. The yellow flash, Minato, got up early on Valentine's Day. It was something he did rarely, since he tried to get as much sleep as possible before he had to get into work and work through stacks and stacks of paperwork. He smiled warmly as he walked into his room where his wife was. She had just woke up before he walked in. Minato chuckled softly. Good morning, Kushina. He kissed her forehead. Kushina gently rubbed her eyes and glanced at the clock. It took her a few seconds to realize the time. Her eye widened in shock. It's going to be late for school. Before the worried mother could get out of bed, her husband stopped her. It's all right, Kushina. I've already prepared everything and sent Naruto to school. Kushina sighed relief, then looked up at Minato. Did you walk him to school? The fourth Hokage blushed slightly. Well, about 2/3 of the way there until he insisted that I let him walk by himself. The red-haired mother was open her mouth to argue with him, but closed it. She was too tired to argue. Thanks, honey. She smiled lovingly up at her husband. She blushed hard as she noticed the food on the plate next to him. Minato grinned. When I got home, I just had enough time to prepare breakfast for you. So, enjoy. He passed the plate over to his loving wife. She smiled widely and kissed him gently. Thank you so much, Minato. Naruto chuckled as he got into class with a present wrapped up that his mother had helped him make it last night. He took a deep breath and grinned happily. He walked up to where Hinata was sitting. Hey, Hinata. The Hyuga looked up at the Uzumaki's waterfall blue eyes. She noticed the present that the boy was holding in his hands. She blushed hard. Oh, hey, ini Naruto. Is tea that for Sakura? They both glanced at the pink-haired girl, Sakura, who was over at Sasuke's desk like most other girls. Hinata looked down at her desk and twiddled her fingers. Naruto shook his head. Nope, this is for you, Hinata. Happy Valentine's, you know. Hinata's entire face turned red and quickly looked back up at her crush. F for me. Why you got me a gift in Naruto? She swallowed hard. Naruto laughed slightly and put the box down on the shy girl's desk. That's what I said. He slowly walked back down to his desk. The Hyuga was somewhat glad that Naruto went back to his own desk because she felt like was on the urge of passing out in embarrassment and happiness. Her eyes widened in shock after about a minute where she tried to calm herself down. How was she going to give Naruto his present now? She was too embarrassed to walk all the way to his desk. There were too many people in the class, and she wouldn't know what to say. She shook her head quickly and whimpered quietly. She looked down at the yellow-haired boy. As soon as the lesson begun, she had gathered her thoughts together, and she promised to herself that she would give it to him after school. At the end of the day, Naruto's opinion on Valentine's Day was still the same. It was pointless. He hasn't got anything from anyone all day, which contrasted how Sasuke's day went with almost every girl in school. He groaned as he walked out of the academy building, not trying to hide from his mother this time. And Naruto, a person with a soft, quiet voice, was standing in front of the fourth Hokage's son. The quiet person blushed hard and looked down at the ground. It had taken the timid person all day to build up the courage to say that one sentence. Naruto stopped walking and put his hands behind his head. "Oh, hey, Hinata." He cocked his head and pouted. "Is everything okay? Did you not like my gift?" The girl's face became redder and redder each second. What? And no, I loved it in Naruto. She swallowed hard as her face became hotter with embarrassment. She slowly revealed a wrapped-up present that she was hiding behind her. She closed her eyes tightly. Happy Valentine's Day. She was ready to hear the upcoming rejection of her gift as her heart pounded against her chest. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise. He began to blush slightly and smiled widely. "Oh, really, Hinata?" "For me." Hinata replied with a slight nod. Naruto slowly took the gift. "Thank you, Hinata. You're so kind, you know." Hinata's eyes widened in shock and her heart skipped a beat when she received the compliment from Naruto. "Why, you're welcome in Naruto." She slowly opened her eyes and smiled shyly. A woman slowly walked over to the two kids that were together outside the academy building. She put her hands on the shoulders of the Uzumaki. Naruto's eyes widened, and he quickly turned around to see his mother standing before him. Mom. Ashi." Kushina giggled as she grinned. "Hey, Naruto, is this your girlfriend?" As soon as Hinata heard the word girlfriend, her whole face turned red once again in embarrassment. Naruto shook his head as he began to blush as well. "And no, Mom. We're just friends." Naruto sighed gently. "Isn't that right, Hinata?" The Hyuga looked down to the floor. She was disappointed that she wasn't Naruto's girlfriend, however. She was glad that she was his friend. She gently nodded her head, but didn't say anything. She was too embarrassed and too shy to say anything, especially with Naruto's mother there. The red-haired woman pouted. "Oh, that's a shame. Anyway, we should be getting home now, Naruto." The boy's blush slowly faded away. Yeah, okay, Mom." Naruto sighed, then slowly smiled. She waved at the embarrassed girl. "Bye, Hinata. See you tomorrow, you know." Hinata smiled shyly and waved back as she watched her crush walk away. "Why, yeah. See you tomorrow, Naruto." A week or so after Valentine's Day, the weather started to get warmer. It seemed as if winter was fading away as the new month was getting closer. The days were getting longer and the nights were getting warmer. Spring was close on reaching the Hidden Leaf Village. Naruto, the yellow flash, walked into the living room where his beloved wife and son were. "Would you come with me for a while?" Naruto swallowed hard. He assumed he was in trouble. Sure, all right, Dad." The child slowly got off the couch that he was sitting with his mother on. Kushina glanced at her husband and gave him a loving smile. Minato blushed and gave his wife a loving smile back before he and their son walked off. Naruto groaned as he and the fourth Hokage walked up to the top of the Hokage's mansion. "Dad, why are we going to the top?" He pouted gently. As soon as the Uzumaki asked this question, they arrived at the very top of the Hokage's mansion. This spot gave a clear view over almost every inch of the village that Minato was the leader of, from the academy to the main gates. It could all be seen from this one place. Minato chuckled. "You asked why we're here, Naruto?" Naruto replied with a nod and looked up at his father, noticing his attention was now on the four faces that were carved into stone. "Do you know who these four people are, Naruto?" Naruto rolled his eyes. Duh. Everyone knows who they are. The one on the far right is you, and the other three are the past Hokage. Minato chuckled. That's right. But do you know their names? Naruto blushed slightly and looked at the four faces. Someone, old man third, and you, Minato, my dad. Minato rolled his eyes and gave his son a light smile. He had a feeling that he hadn't been listening much in class. Well then, let me tell you then, and please listen. He turned around to face his son. The first Hokage was Hashirama Senju. He was one of the founders of this village and also created it alongside his best friend. He is still known to this day as one of the strongest ninja. Minato stopped talking for a few seconds to see if Naruto was still listening. Naruto nodded gently, and his father continued talking. The next Hokage, the second, was Tobirama Senju. He was brothers with the first Hokage. He helped the village grow even stronger after Hashirama's death. Minato smirked gently. So who were the first two Hokage? Naruto smiled gently. Hashirama and his brother Tobi. Minato smiled even more and nodded. The third Hokage is not called Old Man Third. His actual name is Hiruzen Sarutobi. He was taught by the first Hokage, and he taught every ninja the will of fire that Hashirama's taught him. He has made all our ninja much stronger with his wisdom. Minato grinned. And Hiruzen taught Jiraiya-sensei, who taught your father. He rubbed the back of his head. And last but not least, there's me, Minato Namikaze. Before I was Hokage, I was known as the Yellow Flash by most ninja from other villages. And without help from Jiraiya. The third Hokage, your mother and everyone in the village, I would have never have become the fourth Hokage. Naruto sighed and scratched the back of his head. Okay, I get it. All the Hokage changed the village in some way, but why are you telling me this? Minato smiled sentimentally down at his child. Naruto, your dream is to become Hokage, right? To do so you don't just need physical strength. You'll need to gain the trust of the ninja of the village and make the village even greater than it already is. The fourth Hokage put his hand down on top of the child's head. I'm sure that you will become a powerful ninja, just like the past Hokage, and one day have your face next to mine up there. He pointed up at the current and past leaders of the village. But you'll need to work hard because Obito has the same dream as you do. Obito Uchiha, the boy who risked his life to save his friends. He had a warm and open heart. He had been close to Naruto whilst he grew up, and still to this day, they would train together. Kushina had said their personalities were almost identical. But even still, the Uzumaki wasn't going to be beaten by an Uchiha anytime soon. After Naruto thought about Obito for a couple of seconds before he shook his head slightly. Obito may have more experience than me since he's older, and he may have the Sharingan. However, there is no way is he becoming Hokage before me. He can be the sixth Hokage because the title of the fifth Hokage has already been taken by me. Naruto chuckled, and so did his father. Well then, you'll have to train hard, study hard, and make relationships with people in the village if that is going to be true. Naruto blushed slightly as they walked back inside. He was sure he could train hard, however. It seemed that he couldn't find a secret to learn ninjutsu, or jinjutsu effectively. Also, he knew that he was terrible at his studies, just like his mother was. But still there was no way that was going to stop him from achieving his goal. He looked up at his father and smiled warmly. He was glad that he gave him that talk, since it made his dream become much clearer. When Naruto walked back downstairs, his mom picked him up and grinned. Hey Naruto, want to go to Ichiraku's for dinner? Naruto looked up into his mother's eyes confused. Raku? What's that? Kushina looked at her son as if he had just asked the most stupidest question ever. What's Ichiraku's? Hasn't Obito ever taken you there? The mother's smile widened. Well, you'll see when we get there. I bet you'll love it. Naruto looked up at the ramen place and cocked his head. So, Ichiraku's a place that serves food? Kushina nodded whilst holding her son's hand. That's right. Here we could get the world's greatest ramen. Naruto's eyes widened in shock. Ramen. It was what had quickly become his favorite food a few years ago, and now his mother was telling him that the best ramen in the world was just meters away from him. Oh, really? No yoke. Kushina replied with a nod and a wink. Yup, that's right. Come on, let's go inside. The mother, father, and son walked inside and sat down. The mother ordered 3 bowls of miso ramen. Naruto looked around the small restaurant. Hey, Mom, it's not a very big place for the world's greatest ramen. Kushina ruffled her child's hair. Don't let the appearance of the place fool you. Naruto couldn't think of a reply because the ramen had just been served. He forgot about everything else as he stared down at the bowl in amazement. Not only was the ramen served so quickly after ordering, the appearance was outstanding. He had never seen a bowl of ramen look so appetizing. He had to stop himself from drooling. He looked up at his parents and the chef. T, thanks for the food. Kushina was right. Ichiraku's ramen was the world's greatest ramen. Naruto walked out of the building whilst happily holding her hand. Minato smiled warmly at his child. I'm glad you liked it, son. Naruto nodded. Yeah, I loved it. Can we go Aga dash? Naruto was interrupted by a girl running towards them. Minato-sensei. Minato turned to his left to see a girl with brown hair running towards them alongside a boy with goggles on his forehead. Rin? Obito? Is everything all right? He looked at 2 of his former students. Rin furiously shook her head. And no, Kakashi just come back from a mission with 2 other Umbu ninjas, and they were rushed in a hospital. Obito nodded to what Rin had just said. The 4th Hokage's eyes widened, and he looked at his family. I'm sorry. I'll be back home soon. I need to go and check how Kakashi is doing. Kushina nodded to her husband, and with that, the yellow flash had disappeared in an instant. Konoha's hospital was one of the best in the 5 great nations. One of the main reasons for this was because most knowledge about medical ninjutsu was taught from a woman called Tsunade, one of the 3 legendary Sannin. The hospital had increased dramatically in quality ever since Tsunade obtained the title of head doctor. The hospital that was situated in Eihei Hidden Leaf Village provided services such as ultrasound scans to rehabilitation to saving lives that are in critical state. Minato walked down the clean, white corridor to the room that Kakashi and the other 2 ninja were recuperating. Every footstep he took down the long corridor echoed and faded away when he took his next step. 112. That was the number that the Kakashi the copy ninja was in. Minato slowly slid open the door that belonged to the room 112. As he walked in, he noticed the white-haired Umbu sitting up in a hospital bed, reading a book by one of the other legendary Sannin. Minato sighed, slightly in relief, and smiled. Kakashi, you seem to be recovering already. I was quite worried since Rin had made it sound like the situation was much worse. Kakashi slowly put down the book next to the bed he was in as he slowly looked up at his former teacher. Sensei, I wasn't expecting to see you here so quickly. I only got here a couple of hours ago. He sighed. I used my Sharingan too much, and he moved the material that was covering his lower body to the side. He revealed the bandages warped around his waist. I was lucky. They didn't hit any vital spots. The ninjas that attacked us 3, they seemed to be Rouge ninjas. Minato sat down next to the hospital bed. He was shocked that there could be any Rouge ninjas from anywhere that could damage these 3 this badly. I see. What village were these ninja formerly from? They had hidden mist village headbands. A person close to Kakashi answered the 4th Hokage's question before he could. Minato looked over to the black-haired Umbu that answered the question. Hidden mist? Rouge? He slowly closed his eyes as he thought for a couple of seconds. Itachi, did any of these individuals happen to have an unusual sword? Itachi put one hand to his left temple as he thought about the question. My memory is a little hazy, but I think 1 or 2 of them did have swords that looked quite unique. I also remember that there was also someone else with them who wore a mask that looked like they belonged to the Umbu or another hidden organization in the Hidden Mist. Itachi shook his head as he tried to remember the fight that didn't happen too long ago. But the ninja with the mask was definitely Rouge as well. So I guess the individual stole it or used to work with the Umbu. Kakashi gently nodded in agreement, whilst Minato listened to the Uchiha's every word. After the yellow-haired leader thought for a while, he slowly stood up. And how's Tei? He shook his head. I mean Yamato. What happened to Yamato? He glanced over at Tenzo, or Yamato, since he preferred to be called by his codename. Kakashi sighed. He suffered the worst. He used up most of his chakra and broke a few bones in both arms. The white-haired ninja frowned. These ninja were extremely powerful. I've never seen Rouge ninjas that are so powerful. Minato frowned. The three of Izumbu's mission was only to retrieve information regarding the Chunin exams being held in the Hidden Stone Village. So why were Rouge ninja interfering with them? Especially in an area nowhere near the place they used to belong to. Could it be possible that they were going to attack the Hidden Stone Village? Or were there also ninja who used to be part of the Stone Village that are part of this powerful group of Rouge ninjas? Minato sighed. I'm very sorry, you three. This was supposed to be a simple C rank mission for you, but it seemed to turn out much worse than I could have ever imagined. Kakashi shook his head. No, sensei, it's not your fault. You couldn't have predicted that those Rouge ninjas would be there. Kakashi gave a slight smile from under his mask. Minato smiled back at his former student. Well, I'm glad that you don't resent me for what happened. He looked at the three ninja. Now, I don't want to be rude, but did you get the information about the upcoming Chunin exams? Itachi looked up at the fourth Hokage and nodded. He tossed him a sealed scroll that he had been hiding. That's the information that the village gave us. We also found out that there is a high potential for the Hidden Leaf Village to host the next Chunin exams in a couple of years. Minato smiled even more. Great work. He was glad that there was at least some good in this whole situation. Well then, I'll let you three rest now. Please, take all the time you need to recover. After Minato had said goodbye to the two conscious ninjas, he walked out of the hospital room 112. As Minato walked out of the hospital, he sighed gently. He glanced up at the red sky whilst the sun was setting. He had thought about changing Kakashi from an Umbu and into a Jonin in charge of a four-man squad. And after what happened on the mission, he was even more certain that Kakashi should become a Jonin leader for a team. He looked at his home in the distance, then concluded his thoughts. He would talk to the former Hokage and Kakashi about the possible changes for the white-haired ninja in the near future. As Minato walked into his house, he saw his loving wife and child playing a game on the table. Naruto put his cards that were in his hands down onto the table. Ugh, this is no fair. I can't play any card games, Mom. Kushina smirked and put her cards down onto the table. Well, the only way you'll get better at playing these card games is through practice, you know. She giggled a little as she saw her child pout at her reply. Minato slowly walked over to the table. Hey, you two. Looks like you two are having fun. Kushina looked up her husband and gave him a worried look. Hey, honey, is Kakashi all right? Minato gave her a reassuring smile. Yes, he is all right. All three of them are beginning to recover right now. Kushina sighed relief and smiled. Well, that's great then. The red-haired mother began to put the cards away. She smiled at Naruto. All right, you. I think it's time for you to go to bed. Naruto pouted once again. What? Oh no, fair mom. Naruto's actions then contrasted his words as he began to stand up. He didn't want to disobey his mother in fear of her getting into a bad mood. He sighed and stretched. Well, good night, Mom, Dad. The two parents both hugged their son. Naruto blushed and smiled widely. The boy chuckled as he looked up at Minato and Kushina. He hugged them back good night and slowly walked to his room. Minato wrapped his arms around his wife and smiled lovingly at her after Naruto had walked away. Well, it's been quite an adventurous day. Kushina replied with a nod and rested her head against her husband's chest. It has been. She slowly held Minato's hand and interlocked their fingers. The fourth Hokage chuckled slightly and kissed her forehead. He then walked with Kushina to their bedroom. As day eventually turned into night, their ninja were still traveling in the land of Earth. The leader of the group dragged his weapon behind him. Ugh, those ninjas earlier set us back. We better not be late for our rendezvous. The ninja next to the leader was also carrying a sword, but he was holding it against his shoulder. We had to make sure that they didn't follow us. They were Umbu from the Leaf. It was possible that they were sent to spy on us. The third ninja wasn't carrying a sword, but their face was covered by a mask. We should be quiet. We're near the rendezvous point, and we don't want to be caught now." The other two ninja nodded in agreement. All three ninja began to speed up as they disappeared into the darkness of the night. "Sorry to summon you all here in such short notice." The fourth Hokage chuckled slightly and rubbed the back of his head. Tsunade, Jiraiya, the third Hokage, and Minato were in the hospital room with the three Umbu. He had sent them all a message earlier that morning to all meet in room 112 to discuss about the Rouge Ninja that attacked the three Jonin that are now recovering in the same exact room. Minato was glad to see that Yamato was now conscious with his other two teammates now. Minato took a deep breath as he collected his thoughts. "Well, the reason I wanted to talk to you six was because of the incident of the Rouge Ninjas and what we could do to stop them." Kakashi looked up at his former sensei. "But Minato-sensei, what is there that we could do? These are Rouge Ninjas that seem to attack anyone who sees them, and they're always on the move. So wouldn't it be very difficult to track them down?" Minato was about to interrupt, but Kakashi continued with his questions. "Also, why are we six the ones you want to talk to it about? Shouldn't you inform the Mizukage to try to identify these individuals instead?" Minato put his hand up to stop Kakashi. "Kakashi, I will explain, just give me the chance." He smiled reassuringly to his former student. "Now to begin with, the yellow flash revealed a scroll. This was given to us about 5 days ago from the Hidden Sand Village. It says that 3 Rouge Ninja attacked a 4-man squad from their village near the borders of our two lands." Minato glanced at Itachi. The ninja who were attacked couldn't remember much of the Rouge Ninjas other than 2 having swords as their main weapon, and at least 2 of them had hidden mist headbands. Minato continued with all the information that he had that could possibly be linked to the Rouge Ninjas. The information came from various different villages, and even though there wasn't much of it, there was enough to connect them together. AMD suggests that the Rouge Ninja that attacked the Umbu were no ordinary, low-life attackers. "Now, the reason I wanted to talk to you six." Minato turned to Jiraiya. "Jiraiya-sensei, your infiltration and information gathering skills surpass anyone's I know. I know it's a lot to ask for, but could you go on a mission to track down any information you can obtain about these 3 ninja?" Jiraiya chuckled and folded his arms. "Normally, I wouldn't even think about going on a mission like this where I could possibly encounter ninja that could attack me in an instance." He looked into the blue eyes that belonged to the yellow flash. "But since you're now the Hokage and my former student, I guess I'll make an exception." Minato grinned back at him and then turned to the other legendary Sannin in the room. "Tsunade, your medical ninjutsu is the best in the Leaf Village? Is it possible for you to do a test on the wounds these Umbu received to see if there's any traces of metal from a possible sword attack?" Tsunade nodded and closes her eyes, only replying with, "Of course, Lord Fourth." Minato looked over at the white-haired boy. "Kakashi, you still follow the way your father did and Obito does today, to keep your comrades in first priority and the mission second. However, whilst being an Umbu, this can be quite a difficult thing to keep. So I would like you to be a leader of a 4-man squad. For Genin, the new generation of ninja." Kakashi looked up at the 4th Hokage, dumbfounded. "Minato-sensei, why a Jonin teacher? Even though it's hard to keep comrades in first priority in Umbu missions, but I still managed to do so." Minato walked over to the window in the room. "And that is exactly why I think you'd be better as a Jonin leader. I think that you could be one of the best Jonin to teach the new generation that there is things more important than making sure a mission is completed. That teaching is crucial for teamwork to work successfully." Kakashi sighed. He couldn't really say no to his former sensei, who was now the Hokage. He slowly began to think. Being a Jonin leader for a bunch of new genin would be a nice change in pace for him. "Well, if you think it's for the best, I have no reason to argue with you, sensei." The 3rd Hokage coughed. "Minato, I know you want to make sure that these Rouge Ninja do not hurt anyone else, but..." Minato turned around to look at his predecessor talk. "Isn't what you're doing dangerous and time-costly? Jiraiya will be in grave danger whilst looking for information, and Tsunade, even with her advanced skills, will take hours, possibly days to try and find traces of a sword attack. Also, I'm sure you have tasks for Itachi, Yamato, and I. So why? Why go to such extreme measures to try to capture the Rouge Ninjas? Minato looked back out of the window. As you all know, 9 years ago the Nine Tails attacked the village. The cause of this was because a masked ninja extracted the beast from Kushina Strait after Naruto was born, when the seal keeping the Kyuubi in was weakest. He took a deep breath, remembering the traumatizing event. Many people that lived in our village died that day, and so many people were close to being killed. If it wasn't for the ninja of our villages helped to restrain the Nine Tails and help me get it away from the village, then I could have never sealed half the Nine Tails inside of Kushina and the other half in Naruto. Kakashi looked over at the fourth Hokage confused. Why was he talking about this event? But what has that got to do with these Rouge Ninja? Minato slowly looked back at the six ninja in the room. I fear that the masked ninja belonging to that group of Rouge Ninja may also be the same ninja as the one that attacked our village 9 years ago. The yellow flash slowly walked around the room. The reports on a Rouge Ninja with the same mask, voice, and fighting skills could all be linked to that group of Rouge Ninja and also be linked to the masked man that almost killed my family. Minato sighed, and there was silence a couple of minutes before Minato began to smile slightly. Or maybe I'm just being too superstitious and worrying so much. Jiraiya put a hand on his student's right shoulder. Minato, you're not worrying too much. This really could be the same masked man. And if it is, we can finally find his motives for not day. But if it's not him, these Rouge Ninjas will still have to be restrained. The third Hokage sighed. Normally, I wouldn't bother about Rouge Ninja that only attacked our Anbu once. However, if what you believe is true and the masked man is part of these Rouge Ninja, then that's a completely different case. I will help you as much as I can to track these ninja down, and I'm sure everyone else here will help with their will of fire as well. Minato sighed and smiled widely. Thank you. I am grateful to all of you. He rubbed the back of his head. He was glad that his predecessor and teacher were willing to help him try and find out who these Rouge Ninjas really were. After about another hour the meeting was over, Minato had explained to everyone what they would be doing. He wanted to keep this a secret to everyone else in the village, though, since he didn't want mass panic that the masked man was still roaming the world. He slowly looked up at the faces of the Hokage carved into the rock after he left the hospital. He will find that masked man one day, and he will find out the motives that lead to costing countless of lives, and which almost took the life of his wife and newborn son that dreadful day. The sun was beating down on the floor, signifying that summer was drawing nearer and nearer. Irika took advantage of the positive weather to bring his class outside to have combat training with one another. For the students such as Hinata, who belonged to the Hyuga clan, their taijutsu was strong, so it was less of a challenge when they were teamed up with students with clans that don't focus much on taijutsu. After Irika had mentally teamed everyone up, he cleared his throat to silence his students. All right. First up, Naruto and Sasuke. Most of the girls in the class began to scream in excitement since they knew Sasuke was going to win. It was so obvious that the Uchiha would end up being victorious that there was no real point in the match even beginning. However, there was one girl that wasn't cheering for Sasuke. The girl also happened to be in the top 3 best taijutsu users in their class. Do your best, Naruto. The Hyuga said this barely above a whisper as she twiddled her fingers. The Uzumaki and Uchiha met in the middle, about 10 feet away from each other. Naruto smirked as he looked at the Uchiha with full enthusiasm. Sasuke showed little emotion on his face as he looked back at the Uzumaki who would be on the floor, defeated in less than 10 seconds of the battle. Despite Sasuke's overconfidence, he still made half a seal sign towards Naruto to signify that he is about to battle him. Naruto grinned and made the same sign with his fingers towards the Uchiha. Irika looked at both of the students and nodded gently. All right, you two ready? And start. The Uchiha quickly ran towards the knucklehead student and went to quick his shins to make him fall to the ground. However, Naruto reacted quickly to his rival's move and jumped up. Sasuke had to admit that he was quite impressed that Naruto had actually dodged an attack for once. Sasuke counteracted the Uzumaki's jump by sending a kick in the direction of his chest, but once again Naruto reacted quickly once again and blocked the kick with his arms. Naruto landed on both his feet and smirked. Naruto looked at his competitor with confidence and enthusiasm. This was because for the past month or so, he had persuaded his mother to train him by asking her again and again, "If not in ninjutsu or jinjutsu, at least teach me in taijutsu, mom." Naruto groaned as he asked his mother to train him once again. Kushina sighed. "All right, if it will stop you asking again and again, I guess I'll train you a little. But don't complain if you get hurt or if you find my methods too strict." He remembered how much willpower it took to convince Kushina he was ready to learn taijutsu from her. Since he asked every day, and almost every day, he got the same reply of denial. And it had paid off because he hadn't been made to look like a total fool whilst battling Sasuke. Yet, not only was Sasuke surprised at Naruto not falling over the first hurdle, but the whole class was, especially Iruka. He watched Naruto's moves closely after he dodged Sasuke's first attack. Sasuke glared slightly at Naruto. Even though he was impressed that the fool had actually improved for once, he didn't show it on his face. So he defended against 2 attacks. So far, he hadn't shown that he can actually throw any attacks that could be of somewhat success. Sasuke ran at his competitor once again. He threw punches at him again and again and again. Naruto struggled to keep up with Sasuke's speed and his constant attacks. The Uzumaki thought that if he only defended against his attacks and didn't attack back, it would be certain that he would fail this match. Naruto found a slight opening and went to lunge Sasuke with his right fist. However, Sasuke predicted that this would happen. He specifically allowed an opening for Naruto to try and attack to break his guard. Sasuke quickly ducked Naruto's obvious punch, then punches Naruto in the stomach, making him lose his balance as he was thrown back and collapsed on the floor. Iruka ended the match when Naruto didn't get back on his feet after 10 seconds. The Uzumaki groaned and looked up at the sky. Even with his training, he still couldn't beat the Uchiha he destined to catch up with one day. The black-haired boy walked over to his defeated opponent and made the symbol of combat. "Oomph. Nice try, knucklehead." He gave Naruto a slight smile as he looked down at him. Naruto glared at his rival, but couldn't help but show a smile on his face. "Hee, next time I'll beat you." Naruto also made the symbol of combat, connecting it with Sasuke's, and slowly stood up. Sasuke turned his back to the Uzumaki after he stood back up. "Not a chance. The battle lasted less than 30 seconds, and you didn't land a single punch on me. There's no way you'll catch up with me." Naruto gritted his teeth and glared at the back of Sasuke. "Gah, so what if I didn't land a punch on you? You only got 1 successful hit anyway. I know I'll catch up and beat you soon." Sasuke rolled his eyes and sighed. "In your dreams, idiot." He began to walk away from the loser. Naruto shook his head. "Sasuke, I'm not the idiot you are." And with that, the couple of seconds of friendship, the 2 rivals had quickly vanished. Minato and Itachi had been watching the 2 pre-Genin battle from a distance. They were both on top of the Hokage's mansion as they watched the short conflict from start to end. Minato chuckled gently. "Your brother seems to be skilled in taijutsu, and even though he hasn't awakened the Sharingan, yet he still looks like he will become a powerful shinobi." He glanced over at Sasuke's brother. Itachi nodded. "Yes, it seems so, but your son has the will to never give up. Even though he hasn't won a battle, yet he continues to train harder and harder so that one day he can win against Sasuke." He smiled at Naruto's father. Minato smiled back at Itachi and turned to face him after the match had ended. "So have you decided if you want to continue being an Umbu ninja or not?" The Uchiha sighed and closed his eyes. "No, I have not fully thought about it yet. Although I think it would be best if I at least took a break from it." He looked down at his brother walking away from Naruto. "There's many things I had to neglect whilst being an Umbu, especially my brother. There was countless times I had to decline his invitations to play a train with him because I was just too busy." Itachi sighed and looked up at the sky as he smiled gently. "So I guess I should take a break from being an Umbu for a while before my brother starts to truly hate me." Minato looked at the Uchiha in awe. Could it be possible that Naruto could hate him for spending such little time with him, just like Itachi does with his brother? Was there any way he could prevent his son feeling that emotion towards him? Minato shook his head out of his own thoughts and smiled. I respect your decision, Itachi. Please, take as much time off as you'd like. After a couple of hours, Naruto walked out of the academy, consequently, for it being the end of another school day. He looked around, confused since his mother wasn't there, but then he found the fourth Hokage smiling at him. Dad, what are you doing here? Where's Mom? He cocked his head as he walked over to his father, confused. Minato chuckled and scratched the back of his head. Well, that's a kind way to greet your father. He smiled down at his son. Well, I'm here since I was wondering if you wanted to do some training before we went back home. Naruto's eyes widened. Really, Dad? Why you want to train me? He slowly smiled. Excitement quickly flowed through him. The fourth Hokage was going to train him. One of the most powerful ninja in the village was going to train him. Minato nodded and turned around. Of course, son. Now let's go. Follow me. And with that, Minato began to walk towards the training grounds with his son. Naruto's smile winded as he walked closer to the training ground with his father. Would he be learning ninjutsu, jinjutsu, taijutsu? Whatever he was going to be taught. If the Hokage was going to train him, then he could finally become strong enough to beat his rival Sasuke. Naruto looked up at his father with a face that only showed confusion. Fuinjutsu? What the heck is that? I thought there was only ninjutsu, taijutsu, and jinjutsu. Minato smiled gently towards his son as he answered his questions. Those are the three main types on jutsu that ninja learn, however. There are more types of jutsu, such as Fuinjutsu. Minato took out a scroll from a pouch attached to his waist and tossed it to Naruto. Naruto caught the scroll and groaned. Scroll reading? I thought you were going to teach me jutsu. The fourth Hokage chuckled. No, Naruto. Using a scroll is a simple way of using Fuinjutsu. He took another scroll from his pouch, then laid it down on the grass. He made a hand sign, and smoke appeared from the scroll a split second after. Naruto's eyes widened in amazement as he sees one of the fourth Hokage's specially made kunais on top of the scroll. Whoa, how did you do that, Dad? Minato grinned and crouched down to pick up the kunai. Fuinjutsu can be used to seal objects, organisms, or even chakra. It is a powerful yet somewhat simple jutsu where the user only has to use a scroll to seal anything they want. The yellow-haired boy clenched his fists in excitement. So, you mean I could seal anything away with Fuinjutsu? His mind was flooded with hundreds of ideas. The Hokage thought for a second. Well, the possibilities are almost endless. But Fuinjutsu is affected by the amount of chakra the user has, their chakra control, and their experience. To start off with, you'll only be able to seal away a shuriken. Naruto pouted when he received the information that most of his ideas weren't possible to seal. Yet, well, I guess that jutsu is kind of cool, you know. Minato gave his child a warm smile, then began training him the art of Fuinjutsu. The fourth Hokage had specifically chosen to teach his child sealing jutsu. This was because the child's mother belonged to the Uzumaki clan. The Uzumaki clan were known for their talent in sealing jutsu, and Minato wanted to make sure that his wife's clan speciality didn't go extinct. He had many reasons for not wanting the Uzumaki clan's talent to fade away, but his main reason was because if it wasn't for the Fuinjutsu he learned from Kushina, he wouldn't have been able to successfully seal away the Nine Tails. After a couple of hours, Naruto's stamina was almost completely drained. Even though Fuinjutsu wasn't as physical as taijutsu, it still required the user to have a great amount of endurance. This was the reason why many ninja chose not to learn it despite it being such a useful technique. Naruto lay down on the grass, breathing heavily, whilst looking up at the sky. He groaned slightly. I can't believe I couldn't even seal away a shuriken. He covered his face with his hands. The yellow flash walked over to his son and sat down next to him. Naruto, it can take some ninja several days before they're able to seal away something like a shuriken or a kunai. You did excellent for your first try. especially since you didn't even know it existed until only a few hours ago. Naruto slightly grinned. You think I did well? He slowly sat up and got up onto his knees, but almost straight away stumbled back down. Minato caught him and chuckled. You did amazing today. He slowly picked him up and began to carry him on his back as they walked back home. Whilst Minato carried Naruto home, the child looked over to the Hokage faces. Dad, Waki told me that Fuinjustu is something that the Uzumaki clan specialize in. So why not ask Mom to teach it to me and not teach me something else? Minato looked up his child and smirked. Oh, are you saying that I'm a bad teacher? Naruto blushed a little and quickly shook his head. No, of course not. I was just curious, you know. Minato looked over at the sun that was setting. Well, I guess it would be best if I taught you since your mother is very busy with teaching you taijutsu and caring for us both. Also, I've used Fuinjustu to combine jutsus together, and I hope to one day teach you them. But first you need to learn the basics. And if someone who had no talent for learning Fuinjustu, I'm sure someone like you, whose mother is part of the Uzumaki clan, can learn the art of sealing much faster than I did and also create your own unique jutsus with it. Naruto smiled widely. You really think I could create my own jutsus, Dad? Minato replied with a nod and chuckled. Of course. You are my son after all. As he finished his sentence, the two of them arrived back home. Several days passed since Naruto started his training with Minato. Every day after school, Naruto would go to the training field to practice his technique. He started off by only being able to seal away a few blades of grass. But as he continued to train, he eventually sealed away larger objects such as bugs and pencils. When Kushina found out about Naruto learning Fuinjustu, she was a little annoyed to say the least. Naruto isn't even a ninja yet. He should be playing in parks with his classmates, not training each day until he almost passes out. Kushina glared at her husband. Minato scratched the back of his hair. Kushina, I only teach Naruto at this age because someday in the future he could be in danger because he's the Hokage's son and he's also a Jinchuriki. Now I've tried to reduce the amount of danger by having Naruto's last name as Uzumaki and by only allowing selected people knowing he is a Jinchuriki, but we can never be too cautious. Kushina sighed and crossed her arms. Very well, but if he goes to hospital because of your training, you're going to be in serious trouble, Minato. Naruto panted heavily. He was kneeling down next to a shuriken on top of a scroll on the grass. One more try. Naruto made some hand signs, and the shuriken was slowly swallowed by the scroll. His eyes widened in amazement when the shuriken had completely disappeared. The Uzumaki jumped up and pumped his fist in the air. Yes, it finally worked. Did you see that, Dad? Naruto looked around him, but couldn't see Minato anywhere. Great job, son. Minato grinned as Naruto slowly looked up to see his dad standing on top of a tree. Before Naruto could ask his father why he was up there, Minato opened his mouth. Your next goal in this. Minato made some hand signs and used Fuinjustu to seal away the tree he was standing on. Naruto collapsed on the floor after seeing how his father performed the seal so effortlessly. Please say you're kidding, right? Minato laughed. Of course. I wouldn't have something so extreme as your next target. Your next target is to seal away a scroll and a kunai. You'll need to concentrate more whilst trying to seal them away since they're heavier than a shuriken and they're two completely different objects. Minato helped his child up. I hope you're not too tired. Your mother is waiting at Ichiraku's for us to celebrate your victory. Naruto's eyes widened in amazement and confusion. But how did she know I would succeed today? Minato smiled and began to walk with his child. Well, your mother has some kind of talent for predicting these kind of things. They both chuckled and walked to Ikaraku's ramen. At that very same moment, hundreds of miles away, four Rouge ninjas were walking through the rain with hats covering their faces. When they got to one of their many hideouts, they would choose who to choose next to join them and what to call their organization. The Rouge ninja with the mask smirked and thought to themselves, 2 of the 7 ninja swordsmen and a skilled puppet master. Our group of Rouge Ninja continues to grow stronger and stronger with each new member. He fourth Hokage's child trained day in and day out in the art or Fuin Jutsu, getting slowly but surely better in the sealing Jutsu, until he found out big news from Irika. Naruto felt a mixture of excitement and fear when he heard his sensei told him that the final exams were coming up in a month, and it would determine if each individual would pass and become a genin or fail and stay in the academy. He felt excitement because if he graduated, he could become a real ninja and go on real missions. But he felt fear as well because he was almost 100% certain that you would need to use ninjutsu to pass in the final exam. It was only a week before the final exam that his fear and fate were unavoidable. Irika cleared his throat to try and get the attention of the class. All right, everyone, settle down. I'll now explain the details of the exam next week. Everyone fell silent. To pass the exam and go on the road to becoming a genin, you must be able to create 3 perfect shadow clones. This is the objective because it clearly shows if you can perfect the first stage of chakra control, and it also shows that you're able to perform basic jutsu that a ninja should be able to perform. If you fail this exam, you will stay in the academy until the next exam comes. Naruto slammed his head against the table, and everyone looked over at him as he did so. Why? Why'd it have to be ninjutsu? If it were taijutsu, he would at least have a chance of passing. After Irika finished the details, the end of the academy day appeared. As soon as it did, the yellow-haired pre-genin rushed towards the training field and rested against a tree. He closed his eyes as he tried to think of a way to pass this final exam. He could use Fuin Justa to seal away 3 shadow clones before the exam and then release them for the exam. No, he couldn't seal away that amount of mass or volume into a scroll. He hadn't learnt that level of sealing yet. And there's the problem of making the shadow clones in the first place. He could try to convince 3 people to use a transformation technique to make them look like himself. No, Irika would probably want proof that the 3 were shadow clones. Naruto slowly slumped down onto the ground and groaned. Why the hell does it have to be shadow clones? I bet he chose that jutsu to mock me. A ninja heard Naruto's complaints and slowly walked in his direction. Hey kiddo, what the heck are you whining about? The Uzumaki glanced up at the ninja and glared slightly. What do you want? He kicked his foot into the ground. The ninja chuckled and adjusted his goggles, which made the sun deflect off them. Whoa, what's with the attitude? Usually you're excited to see me. The yellow-haired boy sighed gently and looked down at the dirt. Yeah, well not today, Obito. Obito sat down close to the pre-genin and rested against the tree stump. Care to explain? Naruto looked up at the Uchiha and debated if to tell him or not, but in the end he did. He explained the whole story about the final exam and his curse of never learning ninjutsu correctly. And so I'm going to fail the exam and all my classmates will pass, leaving me behind in the dirt. The Chunin that sat next to me complaining boy smiled slightly and looked up at the sky as he felt nostalgic. The shadow clone technique? They still use that for the final exam. He slowly stood up and smiled down at the child. Well, show me you making shadow clones. I'm positive that they won't be the worst I've seen. Naruto slowly fell onto his feet, feeling slightly confident with his own ability now. He smirked slightly as he made a couple of hand signs. Shadow clone jutsu. A cloud of white smoke appeared. As the smoke disappeared, a pale, strange-looking version of the Uzumaki appeared. It didn't last more than 2 seconds before falling down onto the grass. Obito stared at the shadow clone in shock. As soon as it disappeared into a cloud of smoke, he fell to the floor and burst out laughing. Are you serious? You have to be joking. The 4th Hokage's son makes a shadow clone like that. Naruto clenched his fists. Shut the hell up. I try, but I can never succeed in ninjutsu, you know? The Uchiha slowly sat up and lifted his goggles up to wipe his eyes. All right. I was just joking. He sighed and couldn't keep himself grinning despite his words. I used to be terrible at making shadow clones as well. In fact, I just barely passed the final exam when I was in the academy, so... He slowly stood up. If you want, I'll try my best to help you out. The fourth Hokage's son pouted and turned around, so he was facing away from Obito. He crossed his arms and smirked. No thanks. I don't want help from a Chunin. He waved his hand and glanced behind him. Besides, I'm sure Kakashi or Rin would be much better at helping me. It was Obito's turn to clench his fists and get pissed at the other person's comments. Hey, I'm almost a Jonin, and I'm so much better at the shadow clone technique than Kakashi. He purposely left Rin's name out. As Naruto listened to Obito, he chuckled and slowly turned around. How can you be better if you barely passed the final exam? The two boys looked each other in the eyes. Obito slowly smirked. Because I had to train much more than Kakashi to even pass the exam. So I know the jutsu inside and out. Naruto sighed. He had enough of mocking his friend. Well, I guess it's a fair point. All right then, master at the shadow clone technique, teach me how to perfect the jutsu. The Uchiha chuckled and gave Naruto a thumbs up. Sure thing. After about an hour of training, the Uzumaki was exhausted. He had drained himself of most of his chakra and was laying down on the grass whilst looking up to the sky. Obito was sat against a tree stump and shook his head gently. Well, you were right. You do suck at creating shadow clones. And your chakra control is terrible even though Minato-sensei OS teaching you Fuinjutsu. Naruto glared at Obito as if trying to shoot daggers at him. Well, I'm getting better. I can actually create a proper shadow clone now. He slowly sat up and leaned on his right arm. And if you keep training me until the day before the exam, I'm sure that I'll be able to create 3. Obito put his hand up to stop Naruto talking. I'm really sorry, Naruto, but I've got a mission tomorrow. And it's a mission outside the village that is at least going to take a week to finish. The hope in the Naruto's eyes slowly went. But he looked down to the grass. Obito put his hand on his head and ruffled his yellow hair. Don't worry, I'm sure that you'll be able to perfect the shadow clone technique if you keep on training each day. The Uzumaki pouted, but eventually he couldn't help but smile. Thank you, Obito. I'll train every day, and by the time you get back, I'll be able to create 100 clones at once. Obito laughed and shook his head. All right, kid. If you can do that, I'll pay for all the ramen you want for a whole week. That's a promise. A week went past, and it only felt like a day to Naruto. He was waiting outside the room that would decide if he were suitable to become a genin or stay as a student at the academy. He sighed gently, leaning against the wall whilst he waited for his turn to show off his skill. Sasuke slowly walked out of the room and smirked when he saw Naruto. Good luck in there, Naruto. He walked down the corridor with his hands hidden in his pockets. Naruto cocked his head as he was unable to tell if that was support or mockery. He hadn't had even a second to choose before he heard, Uzumaki Naruto, enter. Naruto took a deep breath and slowly walked into the room that would determine his fate. He noticed Irika and Mizuki sitting next to a desk. The Uzumaki gulped as he stood around 10 feet from the desk. Irika nodded at Irika. All right, Naruto, you know what you need to do to pass. Create 3 identical shadow clones. Naruto smirked and nodded. He made some hand signs as he summoned an immense amount of chakra. He closed his eyes, then opened them wide. Shadow clone jutsu. Naruto took a deep breath and slowly walked into the room that would determine his fate. He noticed Irika and Mizuki sitting next to a desk. The Uzumaki gulped as he stood around 10 feet from the desk. Irika nodded at Irika. All right, Naruto, you know what you need to do to pass. Create 3 identical shadow clones. Naruto smirked and nodded. He made some hand signs as he summoned an immense amount of chakra. He closed his eyes, them wide. Shadow clone jutsu. A large amount of white smoke surrounded Naruto as he used the shadow clone jutsu. He used up almost all his chakra in this one jutsu, pushing himself to the edge of his abilities in attempt to pass the exam. Irika's eyes widened in shock as he saw an identical shadow clone appear from the slowly disappearing smoke. Naruto, you... His amazement was quickly changed into disappointment as the other 2 clones emerged from the cloud of smoke and fell to the ground. Naruto's smirk was still plastered on his face as he looked at his successful clone until he slowly looked down at the two failed clones. His eyes widened in horror. And no, this still counts, right, Iruka-sensei? I still made 3 shadow clones. Mizuki glanced at all of the 3 clones, then turned his attention towards Iruka. Naruto is right, Iruka. He still managed to make 3 shadow clones, so I could count as a pass. Iruka shook his head in reply to both Naruto and Mizuki. No, he crossed his arms. But the exam specifically states that to pass you need to create 3 identical shadow clones. Naruto only made 1 that was identical. Naruto's sensei looked down at the child's disappointed face. I'm sorry, Naruto. I really do want to pass you, however I can't. It wouldn't be fair on the others in the academy. Also, it could consequently lead to your life being in danger if you were put on missions and you weren't ready to be a genin yet. Naruto sighed. He had trained so much for this moment, and he didn't even get a pass. He looked to the ground. Understand. He slid his hands into his pockets and walked out of the room. Naruto gently swung on the swing close to the academy as he looked at all of his classmates who had all graduated. He gently kicked the ground with his shoe. It's not fair. I trained as hard as anyone else that passed. Naruto noticed his mother walking into the academy grounds. He quickly got off the swing and put on a fake smile as his mother found him and walked over to him. Ashe mum. The red-haired mother grinned widely and crouched down to her son. So, is my baby boy a genin now? Naruto blushed slightly and rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, of course I am, Mom. I passed. I made 3 identical shadow clones. He swallowed hard as he lied through his teeth. Kushina picked up her child and gave him a big warm hug. Oh, I'm so proud of you, Naruto. I just knew you would pass. She looked at him a little confused. But where's your ninja headband? The yellow-haired Uzumaki's eyes widened as he quickly thought up of another lie. Oh, I'm getting it later. Iruka-sensei is getting me ramen in a few minutes, then giving me my headband since he's so proud of me. Kushina smiled warmly and carefully placed Naruto back on the floor. Oh, I see. Well, I'll let you go get your ramen, she winks. But don't be out too long. I have a feeling your father will be home early to celebrate that you're finally a real ninja. Naruto nodded and quickly ran off. Yeah, see you later, Mom. He ran behind the academy building and sighed gently as he slumped against the wall and looked down to the ground. Oh, Naruto-kun. Naruto was slightly startled by the soft, timid voice. He slowly looked up at the owner of the voice. Oh, hey, Hinata. What's up? He put on his fake smile again. Hinata's face became hot while she pushed her fingers together. Did you pass the exam, Naruto-kun? Naruto closed his eyes. Well, he looked back into Hinata's eyes and chuckled. Of course I did. That exam was so easy that you shouldn't have to ask if I passed or not. The Hyuga smiled at the Uzumaki's confidence. Why, yes, of course I knew that you passed. She swallowed hard as her face flushes crimson red. And maybe we'll be on the same team. Naruto scratched the back of his head and looked down to the ground with a soft smile on his face. Yeah, we'll find out, I guess. Hinata nodded and looked down to the ground as well. Yes, I guess S-. The Hyuga stopped her sentence when she heard her father calling for her. She sighed gently and gave Naruto a warm smile. Sorry, I have to go now. I'll see you again soon, Naruto-kun. She waved at her crush before she slowly walked off. Yes, see you soon, Hinata. Naruto smiled back at her as she walked off. He shook his head gently, damn it. Mom and Dad are going to be mad when they find out I've lied, and Hinata will be disappointed. When Naruto was sure that Hinata and Kushina were no longer close to the academy, he slowly walked away. He looked down to the dirt and had his hands in his pockets whilst he walked. He wasn't paying attention to where he was going and bumped into a ninja. Gah, I'm sorry I didn't see you. Naruto slowly looked up at the ninja. The ninja Naruto had walked into was no other than Mizuki. Naruto's eyes widened. Mizuki-sensei. Mizuki looked down at the Uzumaki and smiled gently. Hey Naruto, I was looking for you. Let's have a chat. Mizuki led Naruto to a bench, and they both sat down. The ninja looked down at the student and smiled. You know that Irika is very serious and strict. He is always making sure his students work hard and make sure they're disciplined right. He looked up at the sky. He's just making sure that you're strong enough before you become a ninja, even if it means you have to stay in the academy a while longer. Naruto glanced at Mizuki, then clenched his fists. But I really wanted to graduate. I tried hard. I've been training every day since I found out about the final exam. The child stood up, ready to walk away. Mizuki smirked slightly. However, Naruto, there is one other way to pass, and since you were so close to graduating, I think you should know about it. Naruto's eyes widened in shock as he heard what came out of Mizuki's mouth. Another way? What is it? The shinobi slowly stood up and chuckled. There is a scroll in the Hokage's mansion that contains a jutsu similar to the Shadow Clone Jutsu. If you're able to master it, then Irika will know that you're ready to become a genin. Naruto's eyes widened more and more. Why hadn't his father told him about this scroll that would mean that he could have used to pass the exam? He glanced over at the Hokage's mansion and remembered what his mother said earlier. I have a feeling your father will be home early to celebrate that you're finally a real ninja. This would mean that obtaining the scroll would be so much easier with his father out of the way. Mizuki saw the expression on Naruto's face and knew he had made up his mind. He smirked gently and stretched. All right, meet me in the forest in 3 hours with the scroll. He pointed in the direction of the forest. I'll help you learn the jutsu there. But don't tell the Hokage or anyone. Let it be a surprise for everyone when they find out you've learned a new technique. An hour after Mizuki's encounter with Naruto, Minato had finished his work early, just like Kushina had said he would. He and his wife were walking through the village. Minato sighed. It had been a long and stressful week. He had recently discovered that at least one of the ninja from the group that attacked Kakashi and the other 2 Umbu was from the Hidden Sand. This proved that this wasn't just a Rouge ninja group from the Hidden Mist, but it was a group of Rouge ninjas from multiple villages. The 4th Hokage was glad that he could finally relax and spend time with his child and wife. As the husband and wife turned the corner, they saw Irika. Kushina smiled widely as they saw him. Hey, Irika. She looked around the teacher and frowned a little. Where's Naruto? I would have thought you two would have finished eating ramen by now. Irika looked at the two, completely confused. Naruto? Ramen? What are you talking about? I never said to Naruto that I was going to go to Ichiraku's or anything. Kushina looked back at Irika as if he were crazy. What? Naruto told me that you and him were getting ramen to celebrate him becoming a genin. Irika scratched the back of his head. I'm sorry, Kushina, but Naruto isn't a genin. He failed the test. Kushina clenched her fists. That kid, I'm going to kill him for lying to me not once, but twice. Even though Kushina only showed anger, she was also feeling slight fear for where her child could be. To make Kushina's fear worse, an Umbu showed up behind Minato. Hokage. Someone has broke into the Hokage's mansion and stolen a forbidden scroll. By the looks of the place, the individual must have been in a rush to find it and leave because there's scrolls all over the floor. Minato nodded gently. All right, get 2 other Umbu, and then the 3 of you start looking for that lost scroll. The Umbu nodded and quickly disappeared. When Minato and Kushina replaced their attention on Irika, they noticed that he was gone. Where is Irika gone? Kushina sighed. Minato sighed as well and chuckled slightly. Well, it looks like we're not going to get a relaxing evening after all. He frowned and looked down at his red-haired wife. Kushina, you go search for Naruto. I'll start looking for him as well after I see what's happened in the Hokage's mansion. Kushina nodded at her husband, and the both of them went in different directions. The group of Rouge ninjas that had attacked the 3 Umbu, several ninjas, were in the middle of a meeting in one of the many hideouts whilst a small panic was occurring in the Leaf Village. The current hideout that they were in was one of the most difficult to find and enter. The entrance was covered by a gigantic boulder, and the only way to open it was to release to 5 ceiling tags that were spread out across a wide area simultaneously. The member of the group that was hidden behind a puppet slowly looked up at the three other ninja. Looks like my plan is already taking place in the Leaf Village. Soon we will receive information about the fourth Hokage and his son who has the nine tails sealed up inside of him. The ninja with the masked face smirked gently. Oh, so you've confirmed that it's the Hokage's son who has the nine tails in his possession. The puppet master nodded back to his leader. That is correct. A cocky yellow-haired child that goes by the name Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto arrived in the forest just over an hour earlier than Mizuki had told him to meet at. He chuckled gently. Well, I might as well get a head start on learning this new technique. The Uzumaki slumped down next to a tree and carefully opened the scroll. The child's eyes widened in a mixture of disappointment and disgust when he saw the contents of the scroll. Are you kidding me, Mizuki? This is just the shadow clone technique. He squinted his eyes as he scanned through the scroll again. Oh wait, this is just a jutsu similar to the shadow clone technique. He chuckled and began to learn the forbidden technique. Naruto quickly learnt that to use the forbidden technique, you only had to use one unique hand sign. However, the foolish child did not learn the risks of using the jutsu. He did not know that the reason this jutsu was forbidden was because if the user didn't have enough chakra, he or she would die. Luckily for Naruto, he had a large amount of chakra on top of the chakra that was in possession of the beast inside of him. The yellow-haired child trained as hard as he could, with barely any breaks in between the crucial hour. He sat down on the grass and sighed gently. I better rest up for now until Mizuki turns up. He laid down on the lush green grass whilst he watched the sky turn a blood red as the sun began to set. The academy student was to focus on regaining his strength and looking up at the darkening sky through the gaps between the trees that he forgot to use his scent of hearing to listen for Mizuki arriving. Naruto, what are you doing? Naruto quickly jumped up. Oh, Mizuki, I was just resting waiting for you to sh-. He slowly turned around and realized who was behind him. Irika-sensei, what are you doing here? Irika sighed. I asked first Naruto. He noticed the scroll down at Naruto's feet. What's that, Naruto? His eyes widened as he put two and two together. Oh, don't tell me that you're the one who stole that from the Hokage's mansion. What? The Uzumaki pouted. I didn't steal it. I'm just borrowing it for a while. Mizuki told me that there was another way to pass your stupid test, and that the answer was in this scroll. The teacher glared at his pupil. Naruto, you've been lying all day. To your mother, and now to me. Mizuki would never say anything like that, not even for a joke. He sighed and crossed his arms. I know you're annoyed because you didn't pass, but that doesn't give you the right to lie to your mother and mess up whatever room in the Hokage's mansion you found this in. Naruto was about to defend himself, however. They both heard someone land on a tree branch behind them. I'm afraid the kid isn't lying, Irika. I really did tell him to get that scroll. Irika's eyes widened in shock, and he quickly turned his body around. And Mizuki, you did? But why would you do such a thing? Mizuki chuckled and shook his head. Isn't it obvious? It's a simple way of getting a forbidden scroll from the village. Tell the Hokage's son that he can pass the exam if he brings me a forbidden scroll from the Hokage's mansion. He would be allowed automatic entrance since he's the son of the Hokage. He crouched down on the tree branch. Now, Naruto, it's time for you to give me that scroll. Naruto slowly picked up the scroll, but instead of passing it to Mizuki, he gritted his teeth and held onto it tightly. You never told me that this scroll was forbidden. Are you telling me that there isn't another way of passing the final exam? Mizuki laughed. I'm surprised that even someone like you believe that idiotic lie straight away. Of course there isn't another way to pass. Look, Naruto, just because you're the Hokage's son doesn't mean you'll get an automatic pass to becoming the next Hokage. Irika glared at the other shinobi. Mizuki, why did you want to scroll? It doesn't make any sense. A sadistic grin appeared on Mizuki's face. Oh, my reason? It was so the child would die from draining his chakra, and the nine tails would be released. He glanced at Naruto's confused look. Oh, didn't your father ever tell you? The reason everyone is secretly frightened of you? The reason Irika is especially strict on you? The reason you'll never become a Nin dash. Mizuki was stopped mid-sentence by Irika. Misuki no. Shut your mouth. He grabbed a shuriken and hurled it at Mizuki. Whilst the shuriken was in mid-air, Mizuki caught it before it could hurt him. He smirked and shook his head. Naruto, let me tell you what everyone else is too scared to tell you. You have a monster inside of you. A monster that attacked the village when you were born. That monster killed Irika's parents who tried their best to stop the monster from attacking the village. He shook his head whilst the sickening smirk was stuck on his face. That murderous monster is inside you, and the people of the village have seen you as a monster, a curse to the shinobi world, since the day you were born. The Uzumaki shook his head and gritted his teeth, trying to block himself from what he was hearing. No, you're lying. That's impossible. Someone like my mother or father would have told me if it were true. Mizuki laughed at the child's attempt to throw away the newly learnt truth. Well, of course no one told you. They're too scared that if you lent the truth that there's the possibility you would let your emotions get the better of you and let the nine tails out. The shinobi's emotion turned from amusement to disgust. That's the whole reason the villagers treat you so differently. All of them are truly scared that if they do something wrong to you, that you would unleash the wrath of the monster inside of you. Mizuki closed one eye as he aimed a shuriken at Naruto's heart. You're better of dead monster. He threw the shuriken, aiming directly for the child's heart. Naruto, Irika shouted at his pupil as he hurled himself in the direction of the shuriken. His eyes widened in shock as he knew he wouldn't be able to get in line with the path of the shuriken to shield the Uzumaki. However, the shuriken did not kill Naruto. It didn't even harm him. Instead, the shuriken penetrated the bark of the tree. The Uzumaki had fled through the forest with the hidden scroll. Mizuki gritted his teeth, but the smirk slowly reappeared on his face as soon as he started to chase the Hokage's son through the forest. Irika got back onto his fast as he could. Naruto, please stay safe until I catch up with you. He didn't bother brushing the dirt of him and straight away followed after his student and Mizuki. Naruto had stopped fleeing through the forest when he was certain that Mizuki nor Irika were close behind him. He slumped down onto the dirt whilst keeping a tight grip on the scroll. He watched and heard the trees around him dance with the wind. I have a monster inside of me, the child quietly whispered. That's impossible, right? He sighed gently. Yet it would explain so much, especially why everyone seems to act odd around me. Just like Mizuki said, Naruto began to think back to a memory when he had first joined the academy. Itachi looked back down at Naruto and smiled once again. I hope you and Sasuke become good friends at the academy. Naruto smiled widely when he heard the word friend. Yeah, I'm sure we will. Sasuke looked at Naruto up and down. He slowly walked over to where the other children were getting ready to enter the classrooms. Naruto walked after for him. Hey, wait for me, you know. As the Uzumaki followed after his soon-to-be classmate, he accidentally bumped into two women. Sorry about that, Whilst the Uzumaki continued to walk to the other children, the two women talked to each other in a voice just louder than a whisper. Hey, isn't that the Hokage's child? The child with the 9 tails sealed inside of him? Surely they're not going to let him become a ninja. The other woman agreed with her. They're probably just letting him into the academy so he can feel somewhat normal. I doubt they'll let him pass. She put a finger up to her lip. Besides, we're not supposed to talk about that. Not in public anyway. Naruto eavesdropped almost the full conversation. Well, he only began to listen when she said, the child with the 9 tails. Naruto looked around at the other children, trying to figure out who the two women were talking about. He canceled himself out straight away, since he believed it was impossible that they were talking about him. So, it was me those women were talking about that day. He held onto the scroll tighter. And the monster goes by the name 9 Tails, I suppose. His eyes began to water. But how and why is such a thing inside of me? Whilst Naruto began to question the monster's existence inside of him, a ninja landed on a tree branch about 20 feet away from him. That ninja was none other than the Yellow Flash. So it was Naruto, after all, who stole the scroll. But why? Was he trying to find a scroll to train his Fuinjutsu? Minato thought to himself and was about to go down to talk to his son until he heard a rustling in a bush close to Naruto. Minato prepared himself to attack whoever appeared from the bush. However, he let his defense down when he saw Mizuki appear. Mizuki? What's he doing here? Did Iruka tell him that Naruto had gone missing? Mizuki smirked when he saw Naruto sitting down, leaning against a tree. Here you are, Nine-Tails brat. Naruto's eyes widened, and he quickly got back onto his feet. Mizuki, why you're not getting the scroll, you know? Mizuki chuckled and shook his head. Oh, you don't have to give me the scroll, child. I could kill you instead and allow the monster inside you to rampage through the village, killing everyone you love. He then quickly grabbed a scroll and opened it. He formed a hand sign, and a poof of smoke surrounded most of Mizuki's body. What appeared from the scroll made the eyes of Naruto widen in amazement, but also fear. A gigantic shuriken appeared. The hollow circle in the center was about the same diameter of one average-sized shuriken point to another. Mizuki smirked and held onto the weapon tightly. So Naruto, what do you value more? That pathetic scroll or the lives of the people you love and care about? Naruto sighed and loosened his grip on the scroll. All right then, here you go. He tossed the scroll over to the ninja in defeat. Mizuki chuckled and grabbed the forbidden scroll. Wise decision, Naruto. He began to walk away with the shuriken in one hand and the scroll in the other. Minato squinted a little. Mizuki wasn't acting the way he normally does, as if he were under a jinjutsu. But it was his eyes that made Minato worry the most. His eyes were full of murderous intent. The yellow flash quickly threw a kunai at Mizuki. He did this not to kill him, but to injure Mizuki and stop whatever he was planning, because whatever it was surely evil. Mizuki stopped walking. On second thought, he smirked and threw the shuriken towards Minato a split second after he threw his kunai. This made the kunai helplessly fall to the ground whilst the shuriken was still coming closer and closer to Minato. He had no choice. Minato had to quickly jump out the way to avoid contact with the weapon. Whilst Minato was distracted by the shuriken, Mizuki got out another scroll and released another shuriken, identical to the other. When the Hokage finally set his eyes on the new weapon, it was too late. The shuriken was hurtling towards his son, and it was impossible for him to stop it. Minato watched in horror the spinning death that was going directly to his son's heart. The shuriken made contact with flesh. However, it did not penetrate the chest, it penetrated the back. It also did not even touch Naruto. In fact, it hit into another ninja. The ninja groaned in pain as he stood in front of the child to protect his life. Iruka. Naruto's eyes widened in shock as he saw his sensei in front of him. His eyes water a little. Why did you just protect me? You hate me like everyone else. I don't hate you, Naruto. As the liquid filled with sadness rolled down Iruka's face, he looked down at Naruto. Yes, I may hate the Nine-Tails for killing my parents, but I don't hate you. Yes, I was strict on you, but only because I wanted to make sure that you were fully ready to become a ninja. As the drips of blood from Iruka's injury fell to the ground, he slowly smiled at his pupil. I could never live with myself if I let you become a ninja and then go into a situation of serious danger knowing that I let you become a ninja when you were not fully prepared to become one. Mizuki slowly walked up to Iruka and pulled the shuriken out of his wound, making Iruka grit his teeth to stop the sound of pain escape him. Mizuki chuckled and shook his head. Iruka, why tell the child all of this crap? Surely you know that it will just degrade him even more. The sadistic ninja smirked at the wounded sensei. Goodbye, Iruka. If you didn't bother protecting the monster, then you wouldn't have to join your parents so early. Mizuki held onto the shuriken tightly and aimed one of the points towards the back of Iruka's head. Before Mizuki got the chance to dig the shuriken into the back of Iruka's head, a cloud of pure white smoke submerged the three ninjas. Mizuki quickly jumped backwards to get out of the smoke as he thought to himself. What was that? A smoke grenade or something? A figure began to run out of the cloud of gas. Mizuki smirked, quickly identifying the figure as Naruto. Where the hell did you get smoke grenades, kid? He threw the shuriken into the smoke before the figure had the opportunity to reveal itself. As soon as the figure disappeared, another one appeared close to the one that had been attacked by the shuriken. What? There's no way that my shuriken missed that brat. Naruto emerged from the smoke and hurled himself towards Mizuki. Mizuki laughed and kicked the child in the stomach, making him fall back a few yards. Did you really think that you could defeat me with a pathetic punch? As Naruto hit against a tree from the force of the kick, he disappeared into a cloud of smoke. Before Mizuki had the chance to react, he noticed the smoke had disappeared from where Iruka was at. Iruka looked around in amazement and shock. Naruto, how did you dash? Minato stopped himself from going to attack Mizuki when he saw what had been uncovered from the smoke. Naruto, he stood on a branch, waiting to see what would happen next, and if he'd need to join in. There was about 30 identical clones of the Uzumaki now surrounding Mizuki. Mizuki gulped and gritted his teeth. What did that brat get so good at Jinjutsu? The original Naruto smirked. Oh, I'm terrible at Jinjutsu. This is ninjutsu. It's called a multiple shadow clone jutsu. He looked at Iruka. I hope that 30 is enough to pass the final exam. And if you don't believe that this is just an illusion, I'll prove to you that they're all real clones. Mizuki's eyes widened in shock as he watched all the clones run at him. Ofu. The puppet master of the Rouge Ninja group slowly opened his eyes from his concentrated state. Something's not right. The masked ninja was standing close to the puppet master. He looked down at him and frowned gently. What is wrong, Sasori? The puppet master, Sasori, looked up at his leader. My spy should be done with his task by now and sending us the information about the leaf, however. I've seen that he has gotten himself into some trouble. One of the swordsmen chuckled. Well, maybe we should go over to the leaf and get the information ourselves. The Akatsuki does not do tasks such as this one without preparation in advance. Besides, it would take quite a while to travel all the way to the Leaf Village. The masked man crossed his arms. How long do you think it'll be until we get the information, Sasori? Sasori looked up at the leader of the organization. I have no idea, but he better not take too long. I hate waiting. Whilst the shadow clones ran towards Mizuki, his eyes were rapidly moving from place to place since they were all coming from various angles. After about a minute of constant dodging and obliterating the clones that came close to him, Mizuki understood that time was his worst enemy in this battle. A jutsu with a huge range of damage or distracting would be his best bet of winning or escaping this battle. About 20 still left. Mizuki made this mental note after quickly scanning his view for how many shadow clones were left. I haven't got enough time between each of them attacking for me to perform a jutsu of usefulness. Mizuki grabbed hold of a shadow clone that attempted to attack him and hurled him towards a tree. I guess I'll have to use what he gave me. Mizuki grabbed hold of one of the 3 spherical objects in his pouch, however. In his hastiness, he dropped one of the objects. Great. Now, I only have 2 chances of diversions left. Mizuki began to run in the opposite direction of Naruto, the clones and Iruka, to give himself some time to create the diversion. He forcefully threw the object down onto the ground, and it exploded into a thick cloud of purple gas. Minato saw the smoke from the branch of the tree. His eyes slowly narrowed. Purple smoke? Is it possible that it's... No. He quickly jumped down toward the newly emerged gas. Naruto and his clones were running straight to the cloud of gas. You can't hide in that gas, Mizuki. One will find you. He was about to make contact with the purple substance before he heard something hit the ground and a flash of light grabbed hold of him. The Uzumaki was carried over to Iruka. What the hell are you doing here? I was just about to defeat him, so why did you stop me? Naruto looked up at the yellow flash in a mixture of anger and surprise. The Hokage glanced down at his child. Look over at the gas. Every single shadow clone had ran into the gas foolishly. None of them lasted more than 5 seconds in the purple substance. That is poisonous gas. If you had breathed in and you had been in hospital for quite a few days. It's possible that even it coming into contact with your skin could have been fatal. Oh, he, Naruto, chuckled gently and rubbed the back of his head. The smoke slowly began to diffuse in the atmosphere. But what about Mizuki? Are you just going to let him escape? Minato gently shook his head. No, of course not. I'll go after him. He put a hand on his child's shoulder. I know that you wanted to feed him, but as your father and the Hokage, I ask you for a favor. Naruto, please help Irika to the hospital, and I'll meet you two there soon. All right, Dad. Naruto smiled a toothy grin. Minato nodded and smiled, then disappeared into thin air in a flash. Naruto and Irika slowly walked out of forest and headed to the hospital. Naruto had helped Irika warp a bandage around the wound his injury in an attempt to suppress it and reduce the amount of blood that was being lost. The Uzumaki slowly looked up towards the moon and sighed gently. I am sorry. That wound was my fault, but I'm glad that you came when you did. It was possible that you saved my life, you know. Irika smiled, slightly weakly. I'm glad I came when I did as well. Oh, I've got a gift for you as well. Naruto cocked his head. Shouldn't I be the one who's giving you a gift for saving my life? Well, you saved my life when using that jutsu, so they cancel each other out. Irika slowly loosened his ninja headband and handed it out to Naruto. You've shown that you can produce at least 10 times the amount of shadow clones that you need to pass the exam. I think that, and learning a jutsu in such a short period of time, shows you're more than capable of becoming a genin. Naruto's eyes widened, and he stopped walking. He stared down at the headband and swallowed hard. So what are you saying? Irika sighed and smiled. I'm saying that this one time, I'll make an exception and allow you to pass the final exam. Naruto Uzumaki, you are now a genin. Please take this headband. The faint light from the slowly emerging night sky reflected against the metal. Naruto smiled widely and slowly took the headband and held it close to him as the two of them walked through the doors of the hospital. Mizuki hid behind a tree and gritted his teeth. Crap, out of all the ninja that I had to attack by, it had to be the Yellow Flash. At this point, I won't be able to send the information back to Dash. His thoughts were brought to a halt when he sensed Minato's presence once again. He quickly dropped a scroll onto the floor and grabbed hold of a kunai. Minato suddenly jumped towards Mizuki from behind where he was hiding and hit his kunai against Mizuki's with so much force that Mizuki was unable to keep hold of his own. He's not acting the way he usually does. Minato thought to himself. His reaction speed is never this fast, and his attitude contrasts with what it's normally like. Is it possible that he's under some jinjutsu? Whatever had happened to Mizuki, Minato couldn't take any more time trying to figure it out. He began to use a set of hand signs for a Fuinjutsu technique. Mizuki watched the hand signs in confusion and was ready to counterattack at any second. What jutsu are you, Perfo? Silence suddenly filled the forest, and then the sound of birds flying away to a new destination filled the sky. Naruto, what were you thinking? You're lucky if I don't end up killing you. Kushina hit her child on the head after he explained all the events from today. I can't believe you lied to your own mother. Naruto rubbed his head and pouted slightly. I am sorry, Mom, but technically I didn't lie about passing the final exam since I officially passed it 20 minutes ago. Kushina clenched her left fist as she attempted to control her anger. Yes, but the time of you saying it was a lie. She crossed her arms. Just wait until your father gets here. Wait until I get here to do what? Minato walked into the waiting room and smiled at his two family members. Sorry I was held up bringing Mizuki to the Intel division. What's there to find out? Naruto pouted. Mizuki wanted that scroll to himself, and he tried to kill me and Irika in an attempt to get it. The fourth Hokage shook his head. Naruto, we don't know exactly why he wanted the scroll. We don't know if he wanted it for his own intentions or if he was working for someone else. He sighed and smiled. It may take a while until we find out the truth. Kushina glared down at her son. Maybe we should drag you over to the intelligence division to find out how much you've lied about. Why, you're joking, right? Naruto gulped. I've already told you the truth about everything that's happened today. Minato chuckled gently, then noticed Naruto holding the headband and decided to change the conversation. So I guess Irika decided to make you a ninja after all? The Uzumaki's eyes reached his father's, then looked down at the headband. He grinned widely. Yeah, Irika even gave me his own headband. That's great. I'm proud of you, son. Minato slowly turned to the door. I hate to do this, but I need to go help out at the Intel division. It's been a long day with everything that's happened. He smiled reassuringly at Naruto. And don't worry, I've explained your little break-in to where all the scrolls were, and it's all been sorted. However, in the future, attempt to make it look like you haven't broken in instead of leaving the place looking like a war zone. As Naruto chuckled, Kushina crossed her arms. What about Naruto's punishment? Even if he did protect Irika, he still deserves a punishment for everything else that he's done today. Minato thought for a few seconds. I don't think he should be punished for what happened in the forest earlier. However, Minato looked over at his child. For lying to your mother and your poor attempt of secretly stealing information. I've got the perfect punishment for that in a couple of days. Before Kushina could ask what he was talking about, he was gone in a flash. She sighed gently. Well, I guess if your father has everything sorted, we should start to head home before it gets too dark. Naruto gently nodded. All right then, let's go eat. And with that, the mother and child walked home. Minato walked into the intelligence decisions room that was 2 floors underground the hospital. Mizuki was sitting down on the floor, passed out. He had seals around his arms and legs, restraining him from movement and using any chakra. As Minato stepped foot in the brightly lit room, the ninja inside looked at him in defeat. One of them walked over to him. Lord Hokage, Mizuki's mind is filled with seals that are blocking our way to search through his memories. So it's almost certain that he was under the influence of another ninja, or, very unlikely, he put the seals in his mind himself. The ninja glanced over at Mizuki. However, seals of this level are close to impossible for ninjas to perform on themselves. Minato sighed. I was afraid that this would happen. He shook his head and smiled slightly. Hopefully, Inoichi Yamanaka can extract even the slightest part of information from Mizuki's mind. After a few more minutes, Inoichi Yamanaka arrived in the room where they were trying to extract information from Mizuki. Inoichi was one of the most skilled ninjas when it came to extracting information from ninja's mind. Since he was from the Yamanaka clan, he was especially talented in controlling people's minds to do what was best for the given task. Inoichi walked over to the unconscious ninja and sat cross-legged close to him. He put his hand on the ninja's forehead and began to search his mind. Everyone watched in silence as the skilled ninja tried his best to find any information that he could. After countless minutes of unsuccessful attempts of finding the smallest amounts of information, Inoichi stumbled upon a hazy memory. Mizuki hid behind a tree, holding a kunai close to his chest whilst panting heavily. He glanced side to side and gritted his teeth. What was that? It looked like a puppet, but it don't see or sense a puppet master anywhere nearby. And yet, the puppet was using a puppet. Before Mizuki could think any more about the troublesome situation he was in, a scorpion tail-like object stabbed into his left side. He attempted to shout out in pain, but was only able to cough up blood. He fell to the ground and closed his eyes as tight as he could in pain and also in frustration with himself. The heat from the sun heated the dry ground whilst Mizuki struggled to control his muscles, as if he were paralyzed. The owner of the weapon that caused damage to him slowly walked over to the wounded ninja. Mizuki saw a puppet-like creature coming closer and closer to him. Who the hell, or what the hell are you? The puppet-like creature chuckled in a low-pitched tone. My identity is not necessary. I see the poison has already began to work its way through your blood. He glared down at the ninja he had just injured. You should be honored to have lasted this long. Mizuki's eyes widened in shock whilst he lay on the ground, completely defenseless. Poison? What poison? You never injected anything into me. The scorpion tail slowly moved in front of the puppet-like creature. Only now did Mizuki notice a purple liquid dripping from the tip of the tail. You see, all my weapons are coated in poison. I only need to hit you once with any of them for my poison to have a critical effect on you, or any ninja. The creature sighed, as if he was frustrated. However, I work with the Akatsuki, and we need ninja to use to leak information to us from as many villages as we can from the 5 great nations. So lucky for you, your pathetic life will be spared for a little while after I give you the antidote. He slowly smirked, pleased to see that his poison had been so effective. But surely you noticed that I was playing with you the whole time? I had to test out my new puppet to see if I had enhanced it correctly. After this sentence, the memory becomes corrupted and can no longer be seen or heard by Inoichi. He slowly opened his eyes and stood up. He rushed over to the table in a corner of the room. Inoichi, is everything all right? Minato began to walk over to the ninja before he put a hand up as if to ask for no one to distract him whilst he wrote something on a piece of paper. After several minutes, Inoichi passed the piece of paper to Minato. At the top it said the word Akatsuki. Below the title, there was a diagram of what looked like a puppet. The puppet was labeled with one thing reading, scorpion-like tail coated with a deadly poison. There wasn't much of the memory, so everything that's on that piece of paper is what I found out about what happened to Mizuki. Inoichi sighed as he rethought everything he just heard and saw. It would seem whoever or whatever that puppet-like creature is was the one who put Mizuki under a Jinjutsu. The reason for this seems to be because the Akatsuki needed to use ninja from different villages to leak information to it or them, or whatever the Akatsuki is. So, I guess one way of putting it as a puppet is using puppets for infiltrating information from villages. Minato examined the diagram closely, and this puppet looks very similar to someone, but I can't figure out who. Did you find out which village this person came from? No, Lord Hokage. I cannot find out that. I couldn't see a village headband, so there's a possibility that it's a Rouge ninja. Minato sighs gently. And with the possible it being a Rouge ninja, it also means there's a possibility that this ninja is connected to those 3 Rouge ninjas that attacked our 3 Umbu from quite a while back. There's been too much information that could all be linked with these Rouge ninjas and their identities. This might sound drastic, however. Minato slowly placed the piece of paper down on the table. I'm thinking of setting up a meeting with the other 4 Kage. Inoichi's eyes widened in shock. Are you sure, Lord Hokage? Yes, we've had quite a bit of trouble with Rouge ninjas later, but do you think that the other Kage will care about that matter? Let alone come to a conference with their rivals. Minato sighed and smiled. Maybe you're right, Inoichi, but I have had some reports from the villages about Rouge ninjas, so I'm positive that some of the information that I've recently found out will be to use or interest to them. Well, if you're sure about it, Lord Hokage, I could send out messages to the other Kage before the morning comes. Thank you, Inoichi. That would be great. The Hokage smiled, then glanced over at Mizuki. Now, I suggest that we bring Mizuki up to the hospital, but keep him restrained until we've made sure he's in control of his own mind again. All the ninja in the room agree with Minato and carefully bring Mizuki up to the hospital and into a room. As soon as Mizuki had been captured and restrained, Satori could sense it. It would seem that the Hokage has caught one of my puppets. Our information about the leaf will no longer be coming into us, at least for now. The masked man shook his head. It was inevitable. Of course, the 4th Hokage would spot anyone that was acting strange. One of the swordsmen chuckled. You should have let us, 2 of the 7 great swordsmen, went into the leaf and attacked our way to the information. Not even you 2 would have a chance to get information by starting a war with a whole village. The Leaf Village is large in number and has many unique clans. Sasori glanced up at the 3 ninja. However, I do have some good news. Sasori grinned underneath his puppet. One of me other puppets have found another possible candidate for the Akatsuki. It seems he received great enjoyment from destroying 2 of my other puppets. I say we go pay him a visit. The masked man smiled under his mask. Very well then. I've been meaning to get some new members. We'll head out tomorrow in search of this ninja. Whilst the stars became a source of light in the night sky, Minato slowly strolled around the village as he slowly began to make his way home. Today had been a hectic day, and the next few days will be sure to stay that day, since he decided to create a summit between him and the other four Kage of the four other powerful villages. The Hokage was almost certain that the Kazekage would turn up, since not only were the Leaf Village and Sand Village allies, the fourth Hokage and the fourth Kazekage had a close bond with each other. However, it was the other three Kage that Minato wasn't quite sure on their arrival to his summit would request them to attend. It wasn't as if any of the three villages were enemies with the Leaf Village, but they weren't exactly willing to give aid to the Leaf either. Their annoyance towards the Leaf Village slightly grew when it had obtained a Jinchuriki who had the nine tails sealed inside of them. Minato reached to the door of his house. He inhaled a deep breath, then sighed. It was best he went to bed early, so he had more than enough rest for the upcoming day. Before Minato had the chance to open the door was swung open by an upset child. Asterisk, why did you never tell me? Minato looked down at the child. Tell you about what Naruto? He glanced over at Kushina, who had a worried and shocked look on her face. Naruto clenched his hands into fists. Mizuki told me. He told me I have a monster inside me. A monster that killed people in our own village the day I was born. Why would you never tell me that such a horrible thing was part of me? Minato's eyes widened in shock to hear that his son had learnt about the tailed beast inside of him. Mizuki must have told Naruto about the nine tails before he seen Naruto cradling the scroll. Naruto's eyes began to water and tears ran down his cheeks. So what the hell am I? Am I a human? Am I a monster? Am I a murderer? Am I innocent for all the actions this thing that's inside me has done? You are my son, Naruto. Minato crouched down and held his child close to him. I know you must be filled with anger towards me for never telling you about the monster inside of you. However, I never told you because it's a very long and complicated story of why it is inside of you and why it exists. Naruto gritted his teeth. Don't give me that crap. Of course that's your excuse. I'm a child, so of course you'd say I wouldn't understand. Kushina walked over to both of them. Naruto, mind your language. Before Naruto could reply, she crouched down and hugged her child along with Minato. Please stay quiet whilst your father explains, all right? Naruto nodded slightly whilst his mother wiped away his tears. Minato slowly stood back up and looked down at his child whilst he thought about what to say. The monster inside of you is a tailed beast called the Nine Tails. It is given that name simply because it has 9 tails. Throughout partially all of shinobi history, villages have fought countless battles to obtain the power of these tailed beasts for their own power, protection, and glory. Minato thought about the next thing he was about to say and whether or not to tell it to his son. He decided he would attempt to restore any trust that he had lost from his child. There is 9 tailed beasts in total, each with a different amount of tails. Naruto, you're not the only one with a tailed beast inside of you. Several other individuals also have them sealed away inside of them. In fact, your friend Gaara also has a tailed beast sealed away in him. Gaara, the Uzumaki's eyes widened in shock. He and Gaara were close friends from birth, mainly because of the bond between their fathers. Even though they both didn't see each other often, they also shared a strong bond with each other. Gaara also has a tailed beast inside of him? Minato simply nodded in reply to his child. But it is important that you don't tell anyone. There are some ninjas from other villages and Rouge ninjas who will attack Jinchurikis, such as yourself and Gaara, for usually one of 2 reasons. 1, they want to try and steal the tailed beast and attempt to increase their village's power. Or 2, since almost all Jinchurikis cannot control their tailed beast's power, they will attempt to extract it from them and cause havoc in the Jinchuriki's village. Whilst the new information began to sink into him, a horrible thought entered him. So, do the villagers see me as a weapon of mass destruction that could also be used against them? Almost like a double-ended sword. I will not lie. Some villagers think exactly that, and I cannot blame them. They've seen the destruction of the 9 tails firsthand. However, Minato looked at both Kushina and Naruto. I do believe that you, Naruto, will one day be able to control the Nine Tails power one day, alongside your mother. What? Why would I control it with Mom? It's not like she has the Nine Tails inside her as well. Naruto looked at his father and mother in total confusion. All this information was difficult to take in, but now his father wasn't making any sense. Minato slowly sat down. Maybe telling you about how the Nine Tails is inside of you will help explain that. He looked up at the ceiling before he began to explain what happened the day Naruto was born. Put our child down. He has no reason to be involved in whatever this is. Minato gritted his teeth as he looked over a masked man who was wearing a cloak that hid all his body. He glanced down at Kushina as he saw her face grow with fear for her child. The masked man chuckled gently. Oh, but you see, I need this child right now for my plan to succeed. He smirked under his mask. Now, let's see the reason why you were given the nickname the Yellow Flash. He tossed the newborn baby, Naruto, into the air and held a kunai in his right hand. Naruto! Minato moved in a flash, grabbing Naruto in midair before he had a chance for gravity to pull him back down. He glared over at the masked man. The chuckle from the masked man filled the room once again. Impressive, Hokage. How about you show me how fast you can escape your next obstacle? After a split second of this sentence being said, Minato noticed paper bombs on the back of the blanket that was around Naruto. Minato didn't hesitate. He quickly unwrapped the blanket off the child and threw it towards the exit. However, he knew that there wouldn't be enough time for the blanket to get far away enough from them so that the explosion wouldn't hurt them. Because of this, Minato used Flying Raijin, a jutsu that allowed the user to transport themselves to a specific area that is marked with a seal. Minato used the jutsu to transport him and Naruto away to one of his kunai that he placed in a field earlier just in case of emergency. Why did the masked man place paper bombs on the blanket if he was going to attack Naruto and set them off? No, he predicted the Hokage's actions in advance, which meant his real goal was to separate Minato with Kushina. But why? Is it possible that he knows that she's a Jinchuriki and the seal is at its most vulnerable right now? Minato's thoughts were cut off when he heard someone behind him. Minato-sensei? Why the hell are you carrying a naked baby? Obito? What are you doing here? He shook his head, knowing the answer would be because he was training. That doesn't matter. Please take my son to the hospital then. Then inform the third Hokage or someone high up to begin evacuating the village. Before Obito had the chance to ask Minato any questions about his sudden requests, he was given a newborn baby and Minato was gone in a bright yellow flash. Obito gulped and began to run the hospital as carefully as he could. He knew that Minato was serious about all his requests since he saw one thing he had only seen once in his sensei's face before: fear. Minato reappeared in the room where Kushina had just given birth to their son. He gritted his teeth as he noticed that the masked man and Kushina were no longer there. Crap! Minato hit his fist against the wall. He sighed in annoyance of himself. All right, calm down, Minato. Surely both of them couldn't be out of the village yet, unless he can use a transportation jutsu, but let's not think about that for now. Minato slowly sat down on the floor with his legs crossed. He began to attempt to sense the presence of the Nine Tails chakra, since it should be the easiest to find because of its large amount. Even though he had began to train with Jiraiya once again just over a year ago, his time was mostly spent on paperwork and mission assignments, his duties as the Hokage, and recently he had spent all his free time with Kushina in her late stages of pregnancy. Never had Minato wished more than now that he had started learning Sage Jutsu with Jiraiya much earlier, because if he had, he may have been able to successfully sense the whereabouts of the Nine Tails chakra. Just as Minato had began to fully focus, his concentration was shattered from a large explosion-like sound from quite a distance away. That has to be them. Minato quickly got up on his feet and rushed outside. He came to a sudden halt when his face filled with fear when he saw the owner of the explosion sound. Kakashi, come on, just one more round, and then we'll call it a day. The guy was pleading Kakashi whilst he tagged along with him in Rin. The white-haired teenager came to a halt and crossed his arms. See that guy? He pointed up to the moon in the dark sky. To me, that signifies that the end of the day has already passed, so stop pestering me and go home. Rin giggled awkwardly and rubbed the back of her neck. Kakashi, how about you just play a simple game of rock, paper, scissors, and then this whole fuss will all be OV dash. Rin stopped in the middle of her sentence when something at the edge of her vision caught her eye. Obito, Kakashi's visible eye widened when he saw the situation the Uchiha was in. Oh, for foo dash. Why the hell have you got a naked child in your arms? Seriously, only you can get into these situations. Kakashi, mind your language. Rin scolded Kakashi as if a newborn baby would understand anything he said. Obito, who is this? And why do you seem to be in such a hurry? Obito shook his head and carefully passed Naruto into Rin's arms. There's not much time to explain. Minato just gave me his newborn child Naruto, and Obito was brought to a halt from his explanation by Rin's change in interest. So this is Kushina's child? He's so cute. She begins to coo to the infant. But shouldn't he be wrapped up or something? He might catch a cold. Minato just gave him to me like that. Obito tried to speed things up in fear that whatever Minato was worried about would soon happen. Rin, this is urgent for Minato. Take Naruto to the hospital and keep him safe. He then turned to Kakashi and clenched his hands into fists. Kakashi, this is also urgent for Minato. Find a third Hokage or someone high up to begin evacuating the village. Kakashi looked at Obito as he thought. Normally, he would refuse orders from Obito in a heartbeat, but these orders were from the Hokage, so it was a completely different case. All right, but evacuate the village for what exactly? And if Minato wanted to evacuate the village, why would he want his child to be put in the hospital? Oh, Minato-sensei must have meant the hospital in the evacuation site. But what would make him decide to evacuate the whole village so suddenly? Rin tilted her head whilst looking at Obito. Rin and Kakashi's question was answered a couple of seconds later when a large explosion-like sound filled the air. The four ninja stared up at the owner of the sound whilst being paralyzed in fear. Kakashi was the first to break out of the paralysis. Well, I don't think we need to inform anyone about evacuating the village now. Obito slowly gritted his teeth. So this is what Minato was so worried about. Obito turned around and sprinted into the distance. Oh, Obito. Rin watched as Obito dashed off. She sighed gently. What is he up to now? She faced Kakashi and Guy. I'll bring Naruto to the evacuation center with my. You two begin evacuating the village until you get orders from the higher-ups of the village. She began to run carefully in the direction of the evacuation center. Kakashi sighed. Well, looks like we can't call it a day after all. Let's go, Guy. The two ninja went in separate directions to look for villagers to evacuate. Minato stared up at the Nine Tails in fear. How is that possible? How has he been released? Minato gulped and grabbed one of his kunai. Kushina. No fourth Hokage. For now, you'll be paying your attention on me and me alone. The masked man appeared behind Minato and held a kunai up to his throat. The Hokage's eyes widened, but he moved out the way in a flash. He glanced up at the Nine Tails as he thought, Lord Third, I'm sorry, but you'll have to protect the village for at least a few minutes. Very well, then. I'll stop you, then I'll stop the Nine Tails. Minato threw his unique kunais in multiple areas around him and the masked man. The unidentified man chuckled gently. Even for the Hokage, I doubt that's possible, however. You can at least try to prove me wrong. He threw a few shuriken that were hidden under his sleeves, then ran towards Minato. Rin eventually arrived at the evacuation site. She tried her best to calm down the newborn child, but found it very difficult. Come on, Naruto. There's no need to be scared. Maybe he's just hungry. A shinobi walked over to Rin and handed her a bottle. Rin slowly brought her eyes up to look at the shinobi. Itachi, I'm glad to see that you and Sasuke are safe. Itachi gave a slight smile to Rin. He was holding Sasuke close to him in his arms to protect him as best he could. I could say the same thing about you, and his name is Naruto. He's Minato Sensei's son. Rin accepted he bottled from Itachi and tried her best to feed the baby. The Hokage's child? Of course, he must be fighting the Nine Tails. Itachi sighed gently and rocked Sasuke back and forth. Rin nodded gently. Yeah, I hope he and Kushina will be all right out there. I'm sure they'll be both more than capable to stay safe. Itachi replied to try and reassure Rin, even though he had heard stories about what happened to a tailed beast host when it is extracted from them. Minato clashed kunai with the masked man once more for what felt like the 100th time. He glared at the man in front of him once more. He's fast. I would try to end this with a Rasengan, but is much too quick for that unless. Minato grabbed one of his kunai and began to form the Rasengan in his right palm. When he had finished forming the ball of chakra, he ran head-on to the masked man. I see. That's your unique jutsu's the Rasengan. However, with such a slow attack, you could never hope to even scratch me. The masked man easily dodged Minato's attack by moving to the side. Minato smirked as he predicted the masked man's move. He threw his kunai just above where the man was standing. The masked man chuckled. The Hokage's moves were all too predictable. He moved quickly, so he was no longer in line with the kunai in the air. He stood facing up at the kunai, ready to attack Minato as soon as he appeared. However, Minato did not appear from the kunai in the air. Instead, he attacked the masked man from behind with his Rasengan, which made him hurl into trees nearby. A bone-shattering noise came from a man who lucky had his mask hit against the tree instead of the back of his head. Of course, the kunai he threw in the air was just a diversion, so I'd forget about the other kunai he had already scattered around the place. I can't believe I was fooled by such a simple trick. Even though anger was flowing through the masked man's mind, he let out a satisfied chuckle. Well, it would seem I have wasted some of your precious time and chakra that could have used on stopping the Nine Tails. Good luck, fourth Hokage. The masked man disappeared almost as fast as Minato was able to if he wanted to escape. The vibrations of aggressiveness went up a 3 as Minato slammed his fist against it. He wanted to go after the masked man for being so cowardly and fleeing in the middle of the battle, however. He had much larger issues to be concerned about. Minato looked back up at the Nine Tails, and his eyes widened. He's in the village now? Obito, I hope you were able to get Naruto and everyone else to safety. Now Minato had to decide to find Kushina first or go after the tailed beast. Minato decided in a split second and quickly began to search the area for Kushina. He knew that without finding her, she'd surely die if he didn't seal the Nine Tails back inside of her, and he was sure that the third Hokage could manage defending the village for a little while longer. After Guy had evacuated all the ninja he could find, he noticed Kakashi and ran over to him. How many people did you evacuate? I evacuated a total of 61. Kakashi sighed and glared at Guy slightly. Seriously? You're trying to continue this stupid rivalry competition at a time like this? He rolled his eyes and crossed his arms. And just over 70. No, I was just curious, that's all. But since you brought our rivalry into this, we're both tied at 25 now. Guy grinned slightly, then slowly looked up at the Nine Tails with Kakashi. What are you two doing here? You two should be in the evacuation center where it's safe. Kakashi and Guy turned around and saw the head of the Uchiha clan disciplining them. But sir, I'm a Jonin, so I'm more than capable to take part in this situation. Kakashi stared to get annoyed that someone once again assumed his rank because of his age. Oh, Kakashi, sorry, I didn't realize that it was you. Kakashi looked up at the Uchiha in confusion. Who could he have mistakes with him? The Uchiha cleared his throat. In fact, this is perfect timing. Obito wanted to search for Kushina ANS Minato, but we refused since he is still only a genin. He wanted to go with this person. A man slowly walked up to the head of the Uchiha clan and smiled down at Kakashi. Both Kakashi and Guy's eyes widened in shock when they saw the man. Why you're? The Uchiha nodded gently, as they all knew the person who was standing next to him. This was Obito's idea, to go find the Hokage and Kushina with this man. Obito's one request was if couldn't go he wanted you Kakashi to go in his place. He's gave the mission details to him. He nods to the shinobi standing next to him. Kakashi slowly nodded. All right, I understand. He knew that To was about to complain for having to evacuate now, whilst his rival went on a mission. Guy, we both know that neither of us is any match for even a fraction of the Nine Tails power at our age, so even though it's painful, please evacuate to safety for now, and I'll go to the evacuation center as soon as I'm finished with this mission. Guy clenched his hands, info fists, and slowly nodded. All right, Kakashi, I understand. But don't come to the eviction center without Kushina. Guy ran in one direction, whilst Kakashi and the man that Obito gave the mission details to ran in another direction. A couple of minutes later, the head of the Uchiha clan and everyone else out on the open noticed that the Nine Tails' attention refocused to the stone carvings of the current and previous Hokages. The Uchiha squinted his eyes, then gasped as he saw who the Nine Tails was focused on. That's... Minato glared at the tailed beast before him. Even though he was a few hundred meters away from the beast, he could still feel his breath hitting him. The Nine Tails let out a deafening roar that could be heard 4 miles away. After it made its presence known to anyone near that was stupid enough to not realize him already there, he began to form an immense ball of chakra. Minato gritted his teeth as he watched the energy form into a ball. If the Nine Tails were to shoot it against the stone faces that he was standing on, it could be possible that the Hu village could be wiped out. The fourth Hokage slowly held a kunai in both of his hands and held it up towards the Nine Tails. I'll stop you. I won't allow you to destroy my home. Sasuke's father looked up at the Nine Tails and felt his heart rate increase rapidly as he saw a dark purple ball form. What the hell is that? It looks similar to the Hokage's Rasengan, but about 100 times larger. Guy had just reached the evacuation center when he noticed a large object form in the air. His eyes widened in shock and fear. Did the Nine Tails create that? Who else could have? The fourth Hokage slowly held a kunai in both of his hands and held it up towards the Nine Tails. I'll stop you. I won't allow you to destroy my home. The tailed beast growled, then swallowed the insane amount of energy that he collected into a ball. After a few seconds, the Nine Tails fired the ball of energy towards Minato at the speed of sound. Minato knew how the Kyuubi would attack before he even did. The ball of energy stopped, half an inch away from Minato's kunai knife. The energy began to look like it was being sucked into the kunai knife, as if Minato was trying to seal away an incredible amount of physical energy. The head of the Uchiha clan gasped as he watched the ball of destruction slowly shrink into the kunai. Is he trying to seal away such a large object? Even with his skill in Fuinjutsu, he'll surely be killed from a loss of chakra. Minato smirked gently when there was no longer a purple sphere. He glanced behind him just seconds before the aftershocks of an enormous explosion occurred miles away from the village. Such destruction. I wish I could have sealed it away instead, but... Minato looked back over to the Nine Tails. I'm afraid I'd have reserved my chakra to seal away you instead. He then disappeared again in a flash. Before the Nine Tails could react to Minato's sudden disappearance, he was pushed down against the growing by the third Hokage with Enma. Quick, we must restrain the Nine Tails for Lord Fourth to begin sealing the beast away. The third Hokage commanded the other ninja with him. Even though he was retired, he would still fight in battles that were urgent, and he still held some power over the ninja of the village. The third Hokage was about to attack the Tails beats again when suddenly Minato appeared in the air on top of a huge toad named Gamabunta. Gamabunta was shocked by his sudden appearance, but when he landed on top of the Nine Tails, he immediately assumed that he was summoned to restrain the beast. Stay down, you runt. He smashed the Nine Tails head down onto the ground when he attempted to bring it off the dirt. Minato leapt down onto the Nine Tails and pressed his hands down onto his skin, forming a seal. He looked up at the third Hokage and the other ninjas who had surprised looks on their faces. Thank you, everyone. He disappeared with the Nine Tails, leaving Gamabunta behind and even more confused. The third Hokage looked in shock at the area where the Nine Tails just was. Minato, you fool. You can't possibly have enough chakra to summon Gamabunta, teleport the Nine Tails, and then seal him away. Seconds later, he noticed the Nine Tails reappear a far distance north to where he was now. Quick! We need to get to Lord Fourth before it's too late. And with that, the third Hokage sprinted towards the beast with his subordinates. Minato had teleported the tailed beast far away from the village, close to where he left Kushina wrapped in his Hokage cloak. Kushina breathed heavily and looked up at Minato with one eye closed. Minato, you look exhausted. Are you finally going to tell me what your plan is? I don't have much chakra left. Minato looked over at Kushina, then turned around to look at the beast he had brought with him. Hang on, I'll tell you my plan in a second. Minato made a few hand signs, then slammed his hands down on the ground. Rin had managed to get Naruto to finally fall asleep when the amount of sound decreased outside. I can't hear the Nine Tails anymore. Do you think Minato-sensei managed to seal him away? Hopefully he has. Itachi sighed gently, hoping that a tailed beast could be resealed into a Jinchuriki to prevent them from dying. And if not, I'm sure he's in the process of doing so. Rin smiled gently and nodded. You're probably Re-Dash. She stopped speaking and gasped when Naruto disappeared from her arms, leaving a small cloud of white smoke behind. What just happened? Where did Naruto go? Itachi also looked surprised at the sudden disappearance of the child. I think that was the Hokage's teleportation jutsu. So, I guess it's safe to say that Minato and Kushina are okay and want to resume their time with their child. Rin sighed gently, then slowly lowered her empty arms. Well, they could have at least came here in person to collect Naruto. I almost had a heart attack. Itachi smiled slightly, then looked up to the ceiling, hoping his prediction of the Hokage being all right was true. As soon as Minato slammed his hands down on the ground, Naruto appeared several feet away from him, wrapped in a blanket on top of a stone slab. Kushina's eyes widened in fear as she saw her child. Minato, what the hell are you doing? Why have you brought Naruto so close to danger? Minato slowly looked up at Kushina. I don't have enough chakra to seal the Nine Tails away in you. If I were able to seal half of it away in you, then it's possible that you would survive, but I don't even have enough chakra for that. His eyes slowly began to water. Since Naruto is smaller, it'll take less chakra to seal the Nine Tails inside of him. I should have enough to seal half away in him. Then, with my remaining chakra, I'll seal away the other half of the Nine Tails with the Fuinjutsu that I created. Kushina gritted her teeth. Have you gone insane? Sealing a tailed beast inside Naruto? He has no right to suffer such a heavy burden and the consequences of light with such a vicious thing inside of him. Kushina, I'm sealing half inside of Naruto because I truly believe he'll be able to control the Nine Tails. Minato sighed. He sounded crazy, but because of the prophecy that Jiraiya told him in the past, he truly believed that this was possible. Minato, stop talking such crap. Her eyes began to fill with tears. I won't let you do such a thing to our child. I know the pain of being a Jinchuriki, the judgment, the loneliness, the abuse. I don't want that to be the one thing we leave for our child. But Kushina, you kept on fighting and you managed to escape the fate of a Jinchuriki. You're no longer being judged. You're no longer a victim of loneliness. You no longer have others abuse you. Instead, you fought and now are living around those who love you. Kushina let out a slight laugh as tears rolled down her cheeks. But now all of that is going to fade away, isn't it? In the end, everyone's fears came true. The Nine Tails escaped from me and caused havoc. Minato held Kushina close to him and smiled softly. But that wasn't your fault. I have a feeling you could have possibly been able to control the Nine Tails' power, and I have no doubt that our child will have the same will as you do and be able to finish what you started. Kushina sighed and smiled slightly. I'm not going to be able to stop you, huh? She stared into his eyes. You're really set on the idea that Naruto will be able to control the Nine Tails. Very well, Minato. I trust that you're going to do the right thing. Besides, if I argue anymore, then I'd just be wasting time that you could be using to seal away the Nine Tails. Minato smiled gently and nodded. He turned back to face the Nine Tails. His eyes widened. No, the tailed beast had taken aim and was about to murder Naruto with a swipe of his claws. Kushina looked up at the beast as well. Her pupils shrunk, and she quickly stood up, a surge of power rushing into her. She ran over to her child and used her body as a shield in an attempt to block the advancing attack towards Naruto. Kushina closed her eyes tightly. However, she didn't feel any pain from the Nine Tails attack. Was she killed straight away? She slowly opened her eyes, and as soon as she did, she heard, "Massive Rasengan." She looked away as a huge ball of blue light exploded in front of her. She was confused by the size and the name of the jutsu. And Minato. She looked back in front of her. Jiraiya. Minato, who was standing next to Kushina, looked at his former sensei in surprise. He heard someone running towards the three of them. And Kakashi? What are you both doing here? Jiraiya looked at the Nine Tails, who was knocked down on the ground by his attack. Well, I thought that was obvious. We're here to help seal the Nine Tails away. But how did you know where to find us? Minato asked, relieved that they both came when they did, because if they didn't, Kushina and probably Naruto would have been killed. Well, I am in Sage mode, so I identified your chakra as soon as I went into Sage mode. Besides, when the Nine Tails suddenly appeared here, it was obvious that you brought him here. Jiraiya grinned and looked beyond Minato and Kushina. So, was that my new godson? Minato nodded gently. He explained his plan about sealing away the Nine Tails and both himself and Naruto to them, both as quickly as he could. Jiraiya thought for a few seconds. While sealing away half a tail beast in someone, then the other half in another person is much quicker than sealing away, since there doesn't have to be such a long time of constant chakra going into the sealing jutsu. He crossed his arms. But I think we may just have enough chakra between us to seal away the Nine Tails in both Naruto and Kushina. Besides, I'm in Sage mode right now, so at the very least we can begin to seal this second half away until reinforcement comes. All right then, Minato sighed relief. Let's start with Kushina first. He turned towards Kushina and smiled. It looks like you can continue the adventure of being a Jinchuriki with Naruto. Both Jiraiya and Minato knew the exact sealing jutsu that was used to seal the Nine Tails and created the hand sign straight away. Minato smiled hopefully. It seems that the seal is just opened, not destroyed, so we don't have to start from scratch. Instead, we just have to put half the Nine Tails back inside, then reinforce the seal. The Nine Tails had only regained its balance from being knocked down by Jiraiya's Rasengan. As soon as the sealing jutsu began, he was frozen on the spot, as if he had become completely paralyzed. If it wasn't for that surprise attack, I would have killed them all in less than a second. But now I'm being sealed away, but not just in Kushina, but her little brat as well. Damn you, Minato. Kakashi watched both of the skilled ninjas perform the Fuinjutsu. How could he help? He had never used this type of jutsu before. Jiraiya, is there any possible way that I can help you both? Jiraiya nodded, whilst he tried his best to concentrate. Yes, lend Minato your chakra. He hasn't got much left, and if both our chakra inputs aren't constant, then the Nine Tails will be able to move, and it's game over. Kakashi nodded and walked over to Minato. He placed his palms on top of Minato's hands and allowed his chakra to transfer into Minato's system. It took the three of them about 5 minutes to seal away half the Nine Tails back inside Kushina. Minato and Kakashi were both low on chakra, and Jiraiya's Sage mode had began to fade away. Even though the tail beast was half the size that he was 5 minutes ago, he was still a huge threat to the 5 people near him and the entire Leaf Village. Minato panted heavily. Now, to seal away the other half in Naruto. He looked at Kushina, then at his son. Wait, Minato. Minato looked around and was shocked to see the third Hokage and several Umbu appear close to the Nine Tails. Lord Third, Minato sighed relief. He shook his head. He could be grateful later. He quickly summarized to the third Hokage what he was about to do. Seal it away inside the child, huh? The third Hokage thought for a second. Well, it's your decision to do so, and I doubt we have much time to be arguing about it. You've taught me the sealing jutsu for the Nine Tails, so I'll help you with that. He glanced back at the Umbu. All right, four of you get ready to lend me, Jiraiya, and the fourth Hokage whilst the rest of you stay on guard and restrain the Nine Tails as it begins to move. The sealing of the other half of the Nine Tails began successfully, and with the third Hokage and Umbu ninjas, the sealing became a much easier task to complete. Minato slowly looked up at the ceiling as he finished his story. And so we managed to seal the other half of the Nine Tails inside of you. Afterwards, your mother spent quite a while in hospital since she had to recover from having such a large amount of chakra being extracted from her, then half of it being put back. But she slowly recovered. I mean, of course, Kushina would recover with help of her power, no matter the odds. Kakashi became an Umbu soon after the event, and Obito was promoted to Chunin for his quick thinking during the Nine Tails attack, which sounds great odd for Obito. Minato began to ramble on, but he quickly realized. But anyway, that is how and why the Nine Tails is sealed away inside of you. You may see Mai as the worst father in the world, but I still believe to this day that you can master the Nine Tails' power. The child slowly looked down to the floor. So, he swallowed hard. I was the reason that you and Mom almost died along with many other ninja. What? No, of course not. You aren't the Nine Tails Naruto. Kushina held Naruto close. That's not what I'm talking about. Naruto gently pushed his mother away. If I wasn't born, then Mom's seal wouldn't have been weakened, and then the Nine Tails wouldn't have been able to have been extracted by that masked man. Minato slowly walked over to his son and put his hand on top of his head. Naruto, you cannot be held responsible for that. It wasn't your choice, and there's no saying that the masked ninja wouldn't have tried to steal the Nine Tails, even if the seal wasn't weakened. He crouched down, so he was level with Naruto. But if I can't stop you from feeling responsible for those events that day, then there is one thing you could do. Make sure that nothing like that happens again. Naruto stared into his father's eyes with his own watery eyes. But how am I supposed to make sure it never happens again? Control the power within you. Keep hold of that power when someone threatens to take it away from you. Master that power so it becomes 1,000 times more difficult to steal. Minato slowly held his child close. It may sound impossible to control such a power within you, but your mind and Kushina's son, I'm sure that you and even your mother will one day make it impossible for that event to ever happen again. Kushina clenched her hands into fists and chuckled softly. What do you mean by, and even your mother? Do you have power expectations for me to master it? And not at all, Kushina. I have the same amount of expectations for both of you. Minato sighed and rubbed the back of his head. Naruto smiled slightly at both his parents and rubbed his eyes dry. I'm gonna go to bed now. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. A smirk slowly appeared on Kushina's face. Oh, and don't forget, I'm still going to punish you for lying today. Naruto gulped. All right. He rubbed the back of his head and quickly ran up to his room. Minato sighed gently and slowly sat down. I think telling him about the Nine Tails was punishment enough. I was going to tell him about it when he was a little older, but maybe telling him sooner was a better idea. He rubbed his eyes in tiredness. I just wish it didn't happen at the same time I'm planning a Kage summit. A Kage summit? Kushina's eyes widened in shock. But why are you planning such a serious event? What's happened? Mizuki was put under a Jinjutsu, and that's why he tried to take the scroll. The person who put him under a Jinjutsu belongs to some group called the Akatsuki, and I have a feeling that the Rouge Ninja that attacked Kakashi and his team were also part of this group. Minato slowly stood up and looked at Kushina. And I have a feeling that the masked man who appeared the day Naruto was born could be a member of this group. Kushina's eyes widened and her pupils went small in fear. Outside, a storm began to dominate the sky, whilst Kushina's body was shaking in fear. The weeks that came after Naruto learning the truth passed in what felt like an instant, and so did the change in weather. The summer warmth had disappeared and the chill of autumn had taken the place. The trees had began to loose their leaves. It was the start of the end for many things. It was the end for such things as warm, long days, but more importantly, it was the end of the days in the academy for Naruto. Autumn also signified the end of something for Minato, the end of the waiting for his meeting with the Kage of the other four great nations. The first Monday of September was the date today and the date of the 5 Kage summit that Minato had set up. Difficult didn't even come close to how it was to convince the four other Kage to agree to meet up in one place. There seemed to be a rivalry between the Reikage and the Tsuchikage. Also, it seemed that the Kazekage and Mizukage weren't very fond of each other either. In fact, it seemed that the Hokage and Kazekage were the only ones out of the five that had even the slightest bond of friendship. Minato had told the other four Kage that this meeting would be important, and if the other Kage believed it wasn't, they would surely hate the Hokage and the Leaf Village more than they did already. Minato took a deep breath as he placed his hand on the handle that belonged to the door where the other four Kage were waiting for him. He turned the cold, metal handle and walked in the room. "Sorry if I had to keep you all waiting. I had to collect some documents before coming here." Even though Minato was in fact early, he wanted to be as polite as he possibly could to the people who could start a war on his village in an instant if they felt like it. In the room was the fourth Kazekage, Raza, the fourth Reikage, the third Tsuchikage, Inoki, and the third Mizukage, Yagura. Each of them was to bring 2 shinobi along with them for protection. Minato had brought 2 Umbu with him whose identities were unknown to all except the Hokage. Minato slowly sat down in the spear seat. All 5 of them were sat at a circular table with their chosen shinobi either side of them. "Thank you all for coming here to the Leaf Village. I've requested you all here today to discuss a matter that I see as becoming a larger threat to the shinobi world every day. And that threat is a group of Rouge Ninja called the Akatsuki." Minato looked at the 4 Kage and waited to see if any of them had anything to ask before continuing. The Mizukage cleared his throat before talking. "Hokage, if this is the same group of Rouge Ninja that you proclaimed to have members of the 7 ninja swordsmen in their group, then my answer is still the same. The whereabouts of the 7 of them is unknown ever since the attack between them and one of your shinobi. We don't even know if any of them are still alive." Minato rubbed the back of his head, remembering the incident many years ago of the battle between a taijutsu specialist and the 7 ninja swordsmen. "Well, that's dash." The Hokage didn't get a chance to finish his sentence since the Kazekage interrupted him. "Wasn't it the swordsman who started that attack on 3 shinobi, then the battle turned to 7 against 1, when one shinobi sacrificed his life to defend the 3 of those ninja? If they're dead, then it's their fault for starting the battle, don't you think, Yagura?" The Mizukage left. I twitched a little as the Kazekage addressed him by his first name. "I never said who was to blame. I was only stating a fact. All right, Kazekage." The Kazekage smirked at the purple-eyed Kage. "And I was stating a fact as well, Yagura." The Mizukage, I twitched again. He had only talked to the Kazekage for less than a minute, and he was already becoming extremely annoyed. Minato saw this and thought it was best to change the conversation without taking sides with either of them. That incident is long in the past, and we don't need to talk about it at this moment in time. Now, please, I would be very grateful if you could listen to the information I have collected to the last couple of months. The Hokage nodded to one of the Umbu, who then passed him a yellow folder. Minato slowly opened the folder to reveal a detailed, annotated diagram of the creature that attacked Mizuki. Now, this is a diagram of one of the ninjas that works for the Akatsuki. One of my shinobi was attacked and put under some kind of genjutsu by this ninja. He stopped talking for a couple of seconds. His objective for this seemed to be to collect information on the Leaf Village. "Why are you referring to this thing as a ninja? It is clearly a puppet," the Reikage stated after looking at the diagram for less than 10 seconds. "That's what I thought at first, Reikage." Minato turned the diagram to face the Reikage. But this creature didn't seem to be controlled by another ninja, and it seemed to have control of its own movements and thoughts. Also, it was controlling a puppet. I've never seen a puppet master control a puppet that is controlling another puppet. Anyway, moving on. This ninja was using quite a unique puppet. Minato wasn't sure if he should share the next piece of information so early in the meeting, but he assumed that if he did, then the other Kaguya would start to take him more seriously. He pulled another diagram out of the folder. The Kazekage's eyes widened in shock as the next diagram was revealed. And no, that's impossible. All five of the Kaguya looked down at the diagram. It was a puppet that had the title Third Kazekage and had an almost identical image to what the former Kazekage looked like, but in puppet form. The Tsuchikage was the next one to talk. Well, it looks like the former Kazekage wasn't strong enough to fight off a mere Rouge puppet master. Raza was about to stand up and argue with the Tsuchikage's statement, but the Hokage stopped him before he could. With all due respect, Lord Tsuchikage, but the third Kazekage was known as one of the most powerful shinobi to become a Kazekage. So this is either an extremely powerful puppet master we're dealing with, or it's not actually the third Kazekage. Raza finished off Minato's sentence. Connections began to form in his mind, but he hoped that they would be false connections. Yes, of course it's not the third Kazekage. The puppet master was obviously using the former Kazekage's face to intimidate his victims. Said this confidentiality, surely there was no way that a mere puppet master could turn such a powerful shinobi into a puppet. Well, unfortunately, we couldn't obtain any information about the abilities that the puppet has, so I can't tell you if the puppet uses similar techniques to what the third Kazekage used. But A is possibly right. I don't know any ninja that uses dead shinobi's bodies as puppets, let alone any ninja that does, so that has gone rouge. The fourth Kazekage bit his tongue. It would seem that his fears really could be possible. There is one ninja that I know that did use dead shinobi as puppets. He went by the name of Sasori. Sasori of the Red Sand. He specialized in puppet mastery at a very young age and became one of the best puppet masters that the Sand Village has ever had. But he went rouge many, many years ago, and no one has ever heard of him since he has left the village. Minato's eyes widened a little, then he put his hands down on the table. Well, we can't cancel that possibility out yet. The third Mizukage leaned his head on top of the palm of his hand. So, if this shinobi of yours was under a Jinjutsu, I guess you went through his memory to find out this information. So why don't you do the same thing with the three Umbu that you said were attacked by members of the 7 Ninja Swordsmen? Minato nodded gently. I've already tried that. However, all 3 of their memories were hazy. The Rouge Ninja were wearing hats and black robes. He pointed down at the diagram. Clothing that seemed to be the same as what this individual was wearing. The Tsuchikage squinted as he looked at the clothing in the diagram. I think it's almost certain that they belong to the same group. I doubt they could have identical clothes such as those by coincidence. So, you called this meeting to talk about a Rouge puppet user and some members of the Ninja Swordsmen who may or may not have formed a group, named the Akatsuki? Seems as if a meeting with the 4 other great nations was much too extreme for such a little problem. The Raikage crossed his arms and slowly closed his eyes. I called this meeting to warn you other Kaguya about this growing threat. I fear that this group could become larger since other Rouge ninjas may be influenced to join them since they have at least 3 powerful shinobi. Minato slowly stood up. I fear that other villages may have been attacked by this organization as well, and without our villages cooperating together, then this problem could become much too big. The Tsuchikage smirked slightly. Maybe these Rouge ninja are going after villages with weak defense systems. Did that cross your mind, Hokage? The Kazekage stood up from his seat and glared at the Tsuchikage. The Leaf Village has the 9 tails. I'm sure that such a village has strong, great power. The Mizukage rolled his eyes. He wasn't talking about power, he was talking about defense. He crossed his arms. Besides, isn't the word strong too big of a word for a village to throw around, which lost their former Kazekage to a mere puppet user? Raza clenched his fist. Don't get cock. We don't know that's the truth yet. The Mizukage ignored the Kazekage, as something clicked in his mind. He glared at the Raikage. And what do you mean by the ninja swordsmen being a little problem? Their skills are probably better than any of the ninjas you have in your village. The Raikage looked up at the Jinchuriki Kage, then closed his eyes. They were elite shinobi in the past. That doesn't mean they're still elite now in the present. The Mizukage clenched his fists. Why you? He continued to glare at the Raikage. The Raikage slowly stood up. I think we should wrap this meeting up. I don't exactly want to start a war between villages right now. He turned towards the door and slowly walked out of the room. Minato sighed. Did the Raikage still have a grudge when he was proven not to be the fastest ninja alive by Minato? The Hokage slowly sat back down. Very well then. Thank you all for coming. Please at least take caution if you see any Rouge ninjas wearing those hats and robes. I doubt we'll have to be cautious about these. Rouge has been grouped similar in the past, and they all died away very quickly. The Tsuchikage exited the room soon after the Raikage. I'll send you any information I can find about the current whereabouts of the 7 ninja swordsmen. But it's not my top priority right now, so don't expect any information to come soon. Yagura waited a while before leaving the room, not wanting to bump into the other 2 Kage who had just left. When he left the room, he made sure not to make weak contact with the Kazekage. The sound of laughter filled the now almost empty room. I'm guessing that this meeting didn't go as you planned, Minato. The Kazekage grinned at the Hokage after the other 3 Kage had definitely left the building. Well, yeah, but they didn't seem too annoyed, so I guess that's a bonus. Minato rubbed the back of his head as he slowly smiled at his friend. Raza slowly leaned back on his chair. I suppose so. You should have collected more information or just made some facts up, then maybe they would have been more concerned. I know. I've been collecting as much information as I could for months. This meeting was a gamble that I shouldn't have took. Oh, but it wasn't a complete failure. You got 2 of the Kage to help you at least a little. Raza smiled slightly as he glanced out the large window. 2. But the Mizukage was the only one who. Minato's eyes slowly widened. You mean that you'll help as well, Raza? Of course I will. Besides, I couldn't not help after what you found out. Raza slowly looked down at the puppet version of the 3rd Kazekage. He gritted his teeth for a second. I need help to find out if that really is the 3rd Kazekage and who created that puppet. Minato nodded gently. I understand. He slowly stood up and held out his hand to Raza. Well, thank you for coming and supporting me. I owe you one. Raza looked at the hand he was supposed to shake. He grinned. Oh, saying goodbye to me already? That's cold-hearted. He stood up and stretched. We haven't seen each other in a while. Let's walk. The Hokage and Kazekage told their chosen shinobi to leave them alone for about an hour. Both of them walked through the Leaf Village together. They walked away from the busy center of the village and onto a path where leaves were hiding where the concrete ended and the grass began. So, your child has become a shinobi. Raza chuckled gently and winked. Hopefully he'll become a skilled genin quickly so he can participate in the chunin exams. Minato nodded and smiled at Raza. I have faith that he'll be able to participate in the next chunin exams. And who knows, maybe both our sons will make it to the finals and face each other. They both walked onto a small bridge and looked down at the stream of water that passed underneath their feet. To some people, it'll be Jinchuriki versus Jinchuriki, but for most people, it'll be the Hokage's son versus the Kazekage's son. I don't think there's ever been something like that in the chunin exams. Minato chuckled softly. Yeah, that would be interesting to see. Let's just hope I haven't scared away those 3 Kage from sending their genin to the chunin exams in the Leaf Village. The Kazekage laughed and shook his head. They both continued to walk towards the exit so the Kazekage could finally travel back to his village. Deidara stopped. Sasori shot daggers with his eyes over at the newest Akatsuki member Deidara, who was doing his business near a bunch of tress. You are without a doubt the most annoying member of this organization so far. What? I can't exactly hold it in after standing here, doing nothing for over an hour. Besides, I'm watering the tress, so 2 birds with 1 stone. Deidara finished what he was doing and walked over to Sasori. Sasori sighed. He hated to have to be partnered up with such an annoying shinobi. But if the worst were to happen, he could just use him as a decoy. I would have preferred to be teamed up with someone like Zabuza, but knew I have to be partnered up with you instead and wait for hours for your stupid spy to give you information about this silly 5 Kage summit. Deidara sighed and looked up at the trees. Well, we're almost done. I've received the information about the Kage summit. Now, we get to have some fun. Sasori chuckled gently. Deidara raised an eyebrow. Some fun? You mean we're actually going to do something instead of just sit here all day and do nothing? Oh yes, I'm going to kill a Kage, allow a tailed beast to rampage, and possibly start a war. All with one puppet. Sasori chuckled as he began to make a few hand signs. Laughter filled the edge of the forest. Oh really? So you're going to kill 3 birds? No more like 3 whales with 1 stone? Yeah, good luck with that. Sasori smirked as he glanced up at the new Akatsuki member. Well, you don't know the limit of my skills. You'll just have to believe in what I say. I think I'd prefer to see it than just take your word. Deidara smirked and walked back into the forest. The Mizukage was currently traveling back to his village with his 2 Umbu shinobi that he chose to come with him on the journey. He wrapped a scarf around himself. The weather was getting colder and colder the closer they got to the hidden mist village. He sighed gently and watched his breath escape from his mouth and into the cold atmosphere. He looked up at the pure white clouds, then noticed the clouds becoming more gray as they continue their journey home. Seems like we're going to have another rainy season, huh? One of the shinobi stopped walking and clutched his shoulder as he slightly groaned in pain. The Mizukage slowly turned around and raised an eyebrow at the shinobi as he looked at him with his purple eyes. What's wrong? Did you pull a muscle or something? The Umbu smirks under his mask and disappears in thin air for a second. He then appears behind the Mizukage, holding a kunai knife up to the area of his neck that isn't covered by the scarf. The Mizukage slowly glared up at the Umbu as the other Umbu watched in shock. The purple-eyed Jinchuriki didn't move a muscle, still confused by the whole situation. Just what do you think you're doing? The air felt like it was trying to steal your warmth from your body. The hidden mist village's weather seemed to contrast with the other villages' weather at this time of year. However, the weather felt as if it just dropped another 5 degrees. The Umbu smirked under his mask and disappeared in thin air for a second. He then appeared behind the Mizukage, holding a kunai knife up to the area of his neck that isn't covered by the scarf. The Mizukage slowly glared up at the Umbu as the other Umbu watched in shock. The purple-eyed Jinchuriki didn't move a muscle, still confused by the whole situation. Just what do you think you're doing? The other Umbu fumbled for his kunai and held it up to attack, even though it was obvious he wasn't going to be helpful in this situation. The Umbu, who seemed to just become a traitor, grinned like a madman. What am I doing? What a foolish question to ask. The traitor moved his kunai away from the Mizukage, but then quickly lodged it against the leader's throat. Lord Mizukage. The other Umbu watched helplessly as his leader was attacked at such a vulnerable part of his body. However, his shock was soon overpowered with relief when he saw the Mizukage's body transform into water. Is it really a foolish question to ask when a trusted Umbu turns against his village leader so suddenly with no reason? The Mizukage appeared behind the traitor with his arms crossed and his eyes glaring at him. The Umbu chuckled. Of course, how could I even think that the Mizukage would drop his guard even for a second, even whilst he was around his very own Umbu? He lifted his arms up into the air, letting the kunai drop down to the floor. A Jinchuriki nor a Kage can afford to let his or her guard down. As I am both, it's foolish to think even for a second that I would. Yagura held a shuriken between his fingers, ready to restrain this Umbu, but also ready to attack him as well. You're absolutely right. However, one day someone will break your guard no matter what. The traitor smirked before his face was covered by purple gas. The Mizukage didn't even notice the ninja set off the gas bomb. But as soon as he saw the purple substance, he knew he had to act quickly. He held his breath, not daring to inhale this unknown gas. He grabbed the other Umbu and began to sprint away from death. What happened next showed that Yagura's guard was broken by the sudden turn of events. He had closed his eyes in fear of the gas damaging his sight. This was a fault in his actions. He felt an unexpected heat creep up against his back, then he heard a deafening explosion. He took a quick guess what had just happened. The traitor had blown himself up in an attempt to kill the Mizukage with him. Yagura ran several more yards before hurling himself onto the snow. He gasped for what he hoped was safe air. The flames on his clothes were quickly extinguished when they came into contact with the snow. He slowly looked up at the pale blue sky as his chest rises and lowered, trying to make sense on what just happened. The Umbu, who hadn't betrayed to Mizukage, took off his mask to catch his breath as well. He lifted it just above his mouth so his face wasn't completely exposed. "El Lord Mizukage, I am forever in department, for you have saved my life." Isn't that the whole point of a Kage? To protect his people? The Mizukage glanced over to the ninja, then looked over to where the other Umbu blew himself up. But I wasn't able to do that fully. I failed to see the meaning behind his actions, and because of that, his life has been taken. But Lord Mizukage, no one would have thought that a well-trusted Umbu like him would turn rouge for no reason. The ninja dared to look over at the now-dead ninja, regretting it instantly as the body was almost unrecognizable. It was as if he wasn't in control of his actions. It is safe to say that he had a reason, and that reason was to kill me by any means necessary. Yagura shuddered at the thought of one of his most trusted Umbu being controlled by a rivaling force. The Umbu gulped and walked over to the body slowly, half expecting there to be another explosion. You don't think that one of the other Kage could have manipulated him whilst at the summit, do you? No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't dare do something so foolish. It would start a war, and they know it would. The Mizukage walked over to the body as well, deciding whether to carry the body back to the village or have the decency to bury the body. But we can't cross that out as not being a possibility. It may be that they want to start a war. Snow began to coat the body. A hole had formed in his stomach from the explosion. His blood stained the snow a dark red. What killed him first? The poisonous gas or the explosion? It's not ideal carrying him back to the village, as we'd be more prone to attacks. I also doubt any clues would have survived from the explosion that could help us evaluate what made him turn so suddenly. We shall bury him here. The Umbu's eyes widened in surprise. It was very rare for an Umbu to have a burial, since their bodies were often never found. This happened mostly because an Umbu would often sacrifice his life instead of allowing the possibility of an enemy learning the secrets of his or her village. After several minutes, the body was buried under the dirt and snow. The snow that was stained by blood was flipped over to try and cover the loss of innocence. The Mizukage looked over where they had buried the ninja. Let us go. He knew it would only make things more difficult if he allowed emotions to interfere with what just happened. There was already going to be many things to get through when we got back from the summit, and now it seems I've got a family to inform that a member of their family was killed in action. Killed in action? Did that mean that the Mizukage believed that the Umbu was not a traitor and was not in control of his actions? The ninja walked after his leader. Could it be that what the Hokage was talking about earlier happened to one of their own ninja? What would have been worse? One of the Kage controlling the now-dead Umbu, or the Akatsuki controlling him? Both of the ninja walked towards the village, leaving the body to rest in peace without ever finding out that he was only a mere puppet to a Rouge ninja who would be satisfied with this outcome, even if he had failed killing Yagura and unleashing the Three Tails. It had been several days since the 5 Kage summit, and Minato was pacing up and down his office. The next Chunin exams were just around the corner. The Hidden Mist had already made a statement that they wouldn't take part in it this time, due to security reasons. This may persuade smaller villages to participate in the Chunin exams, since there is less intimidation from larger villages, but may also stop some since they may find it suspicious that such a large village has chosen to state that they're not taking part months before it even began. Minato heard a knock on his door and sat down at his desk. He cleared his throat and took a quick glance out of the window behind him. Enter. He sat straight, having a feeling who would be on the opposite side of the door. The shinobi walked over to the desk and placed a scroll on the Hokage's desk. Mission completed, Minato-sensei. Minato sighed with a slight smile on his face. "You're never going to call me Hokage, are you?" He slowly looked up at the navy blue-haired shinobi. "Eh, maybe someday." The shinobi looked at Minato with his eye. "Well, anyway, that's the Sand Village's confirmation that they are taking part in the Chunin exams." He tapped the scroll that he had just placed on the desk. "So what village should I go to next?" The Hokage slowly stood up and faced the window, looking down at the village. "That is the last village you'll have to go to for now, Obito. I will inform you when I require you to go to another village soon." Obito sighed. "Really? That's it for now? Well, I'll see myself out, then, sensei." He searched the back of his head and walked towards the door. But before Obito could reach the door, the Hokage began to talk again. "Tomorrow's the day that the Genin meet with their Jonin captain." He said this whilst looking out of the window still. Obito raised an eyebrow and slowly turned around. "Oh, you left that quite late, don't you think? It's already been about 3 weeks since they had their final exams." Minato took a deep breath before turning back around. "Yes, well, I've been caught up with the Kage Summit and the planning for the Chunin exams, so it was delayed for a while. But gladly, I've finally chosen the teams. And you know who is with Naruto?" "I know who." Obito had to think for a few seconds. "All right, I'm still surprised that they chose to become a Jonin leader." Minato chuckled and sat down. "Oh, I always thought that out of the 3 of you, that person was the most suited to become a Jonin leader." Obito thought about the new Jonin leader for a little. Well, out of the 3 of us, I guess you're right." He looked over the Hokage's shoulder and out the window with his left eye, his right eye covered up. "So the new generation of ninja will start tomorrow." "Yes, the new generation. I wonder if this generation will stand out from the rest." The Hokage grinned to himself and leant back on his chair. Obito smirked and crossed his arms. "You're just saying that because your son is one of the new genin." Minato couldn't help but smile. "That may be part of the reason, but this year there seems to be even more unique shinobi coming from the academy." Obito smiled as he looked at Minato before turning around. "Oh, you think? Well, maybe these Unkyu shinobi will be able to participate in the upcoming Chunin exams." The Uchiha slid his hands into his pockets and let out a sigh. "Well, if I don't see him, tell Naruto I said good luck for tomorrow. We both know his sensei will most probably be strict on him." When Obito left the room, Minato looked back down at the papers sprawled out across his desk. 24 children had passed the exam this year, but it was very unlikely that they would all officially become genin. Some would be sent back to the academy. Minato picked out 3 of the groups he had formed and laid the sheets of paper with the information on them in front of him. First, there was Ino, Shikamaru, and Choji. These 3 were an obvious team of 3 since their clans had strong bonds with one another, and the past success of the Ino-Shikacho formation was one that could be recreated. Next, there was Shino, Sakura, and Kiba. 2 of them specialized in tracking and searching, whereas the other had excellent intelligence about the context of being a ninja. Both skills could combine and work in a very successful way. The third group consisted of an Uchiha, a Hyuga, and an Uzumaki. One of them was good at Jinjutsu, the other specialized in Taijutsu, and the other had a rapidly growing improvement in Fuinjutsu. Each set of skills could possibly sync together nicely. But also, this group of ninja would hopefully keep the bond between the 3 clans strong. Minato put the information back into a file, then looked up at the clock. It was getting late. The outside was slowly being consumed by the darkness of the night. The Hokage stood up whilst took one last glance at his bundles of paperwork before leaving his office and going home. The morning came around quick, but then dragged out for the Uzumaki. His mother and father, who was surprisingly not at work, were both there in the morning to wish him good luck on his first day as a ninja. But soon after, Sasuke and Hinata were the last ones left sitting in the classroom as they waited for their sensei. All the other students had met and left with their sensei at least 15 minutes ago. During this short, but what seemed to the Uzumaki as long, period of time, Naruto had thought of what he believed to be one of his greatest schemes all day. He had placed a board eraser on the top of the door in such a way that when it's opened, the eraser will hit the victim on the head. That is, if someone is foolish enough to not see the eraser in the first place. Neither of the other ninja decided to stop him. Well, Sasuke couldn't care less what Naruto did, and even if Hinata wanted to object to his actions, she was much too timid. In fact, in the last 15 minutes, she had been attempting to mentally tell herself that she shouldn't faint. No, she couldn't faint today, or any other day. In fact, now that her swooning would make her reputation as a ninja become negative very quickly. Naruto heard footsteps that were becoming increasingly louder. He grinned to himself and quickly sat down, determined that his plan would work. The other two also looked over at the door. Even though they were sure a Jonin would never fall for such a simplistic prank, they wanted to at least see the outcome. As the door opened, the three Jonin saw the face of their Jonin leader for the first time, and also how foolish the Jonin looked for falling for Naruto's cliché prank. The Jonin hurried through the corridor where they would meet the team of Genin that the shinobi would be the leader of. Not God. Late on my first day. I hope this doesn't set a bad example to the Genin. The shinobi reached the door of the classroom, and the first thing that was noticed was the board marker on top of the door. Oh, and which out of the three would have done that? The shinobi smirked and made a clone that looked identical to the ninja Kakashi. The clone slid open the door, the board marker hitting the clone on the head before it had taken its first full step into the classroom. All three of the Genin watched in complete surprise as the board marker hit the head of the skilled Jonin that was supposed to be their leader. But before they could get a good look at this individual, he was submerged in smoke as the transformation jutsu wore off. Now the clone had his right eye covered up instead. Naruto gasps and pointed over at the Jonin. No way are you our sensei Obito. There's no way you be qualified. The Uchiha folded his arms and raised an eyebrow at Naruto. You be lucky to have me as a sensei. Naruto was then distracted by the sudden thud next to his feet. He looked down in confusion at the board maker, then looked at the other two Genin to see their reaction. However, to the Uzumaki's surprise, the two of them were looking to the back of the classroom, and he quickly mimicked them. Sasuke Uchiha looked to the back of the classroom with slight surprise, but boredom was the dominant feeling at the moment. Well, I guess it's a good thing our sensei didn't fall for Naruto's foolish prank. Hinata Hyuga looked to the back of the classroom with slight shyness as she pushed her index fingers together. I didn't think that a transformation jutsu on top of another transformation jutsu was possible. Furthermore, our sensei was able to use it on a clone. Naruto Uzumaki looked to the back of the classroom with a puzzled look on his face to begin with before he realized the individual. Rin, are you our sensei? The Jonin nodded and looked at the three of them with her brown eyes. That's right. However, even though I'm late, you three barely put any effort into that prank. She nodded down to the board marker. And as punishment for your lack of effort, you all have to do 5 laps around the outside of the building. What? Naruto quickly went to defend his teammates. I'm the one who made the prank, so I'm the only one who should have to run around the building. The yellow-haired child glanced over to Hinata and Sasuke as he spoke. Rin Noira crossed her arms as she thought. Well, there's responsibility in the team, but there seems to be a lack of teamwork, and the actions of the other two seem to be repressed for some reason. She nodded after she had finished thinking. All right, Naruto, you will do 8 laps around the building. I expected better from someone who is acquainted with Obito. As for you two, she looked over to the Hyuga and Uchiha. You will both do 4 laps around the building for your lack of participation. The Uchiha's eyes widened in disbelief. Seriously? We're being punished for not helping Naruto with his prank. Rin nodded. That's right. From now on, you must work together as a team, and therefore will face the consequences of each other's actions together. Hang on. Naruto chimed in. Shouldn't you also have to do laps around the building as punishment for being late? He crossed his arms and grinned. The Jonin clenched her left hand into a fist, obviously not enjoying being told what to do by a Genin who created a prank with so little effort put into it. That's 10 laps for you now, Naruto. Now all 3 of you get going. I expect you to be done in the next 15 minutes. The Uzumaki watched Rin clench her fists and gulped. See crap. She's just like mom. The three genin eventually finished their punishment, luckily under the time Rin wanted them to do it in. All four of them stood in a field together. The Jonin crossed her arms and looked down at her three students. Now, I could you three to tell me what your most powerful skill is and your weakest skill. I would also like you to tell me what you would like to achieve as a ninja. I'll start to give you an idea of what to say. She looked up to the clouds as she collected together her thoughts. My name is Rin. My most powerful skill, I'd say, is my medical ninjutsu, and my weakest would probably be my jinjutsu. What would I like to achieve as a ninja? Well, teach the future generation of the village to become fully skilled shinobi. And that's why I'm your sensei. She smiled sweetly at them all, then focused on Hinata. Now, ladies first. Ashu. She blushed slightly and pushed her index fingers together as it was almost a natural habit. Oh, my name is Hinata Hyuga. My most powerful skill is taijutsu, I guess, and my worst skill is most probably ninjutsu and jinjusta and medical ninjutsu. And what I'd like to achieve as a ninja? Well, I guess I would like to obtain at least half the strength my parents have, or at least a fraction of what my cousin's strength. She slowly raised her head to look at her sensei, not sure what kind of reaction she would have as her emotions seemed to change with every passing minute. It seems that she doesn't have much abilities in her abilities. Hopefully we can work on that. Rin nodded gently. Thank you, Hinata. She turned her focus over to the Uchiha. All right, Sasuke, you're up. My name is Sasuke Uchiha. My strongest skill is taijutsu, and my weakest is most probably medical ninjutsu. As a ninja, I want to achieve greater, more powerful Sharingan than my brother, so I will no longer be looked down upon for not being as powerful as my sibling. The Uchiha didn't make eye contact once with his sensei while speaking. So, we have two ninjas that specialize in taijutsu, but in different ways due to their different clans. Their objectives also both seem to be related to their families. Rin looked down to Sasuke. Thank you, Sasuke. She raised an eyebrow as she looked over towards the next genin. Now, last and hopefully not least, Naruto. The Uzumaki adjusted the headband on his head. He grinned giddily at his teacher. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. My best skill would be in Fuinjutsu, and my weakest would probably be ninjutsu, no jinjutsu. As a ninja, I want to achieve the greatest status possible, Hokage. Then when I'm Hokage, everyone will see my skills as an individual instead of being seen as the Hokage's son, and my skills being pushed aside because of who everyone sees me as, for now at least. Rin looked down at the confident Jinchuriki. I guess it is not much of a surprise that he has the same goal that his mother and father had, even the same goal that Obito has to this day. But I doubt being skilled in Fuinjutsu will help people change their judgment of him based on his father, though. In addition, some people may fear him obtaining such a high title, such as Hokage, since he is a Jinchuriki. Nonetheless, I'll try my best to help them all become the best ninjas they possibly can and hopefully help Naruto control the Nine Tails if needed. Hello, Rin-sensei. Naruto waved a hand in front of the Jonin while she was deep in thought. She slowly looked down at her pupil. Oh, sorry, I was just planning what I'm about to do next with you guys. Do next. The Uzumaki's eyes lightened up. Oh, does that mean we're already getting per first mission? Rin laughed at his eagerness. Not exactly, Naruto. I just want to test all three of your skills. Even though you've told me your strengths and weaknesses, I still want to see them, so I know how much training we have ahead of us. She grinned confidently at her students. All you have to do is team up and attack me. To succeed and finish today's training, you have to break my defense and land a successful attack on me. You sound very vain. Sasuke finally looked up to Rin's eyes. Even though we're just genin, it's not going to be difficult to land at least one attack on you. The leader slowly smirked, almost in a sadistic manner. That's correct. It shouldn't be difficult. Therefore, if you are unable to land one attack between the three of you before the sun sets, then you all go back to the academy. Hinata and Sasuke expressed their opinion with a shocked, "What?" However, Naruto did not understand the full extent of the punishment. Why? What's waiting for us back at the academy? Hinata looked over towards Naruto while she pushed her index fingers together. In Naruto, I think she means that we'll go back to the academy and no longer be Genin. What? The Uzumaki expressed his outrage as well after a couple of seconds. You can't do that. We just became Genin. You can't take it away from us that easily. And why can't I? I don't think there is any rule saying I can't do that. Besides, if you can't successfully land an attack on me, then I believe you're not suited to be a ninja. Rin shrugged. I'm sorry, but my first step as your sensei is to make sure I'm not putting you into any immediate danger from you being unfit to be a genin. The Uzumaki looked down to the ground. So to land a successful attack, we just have to surround you with attacks. Then, you couldn't possibly defend against all of them. He smirked and hand-to-hand sign, creating 5 shadow clones. Sasuke's eyes widened. What? How can this idiot make 5 clones so easily when back in the academy? He couldn't even make one. Rin's eyes widened a little as she saw the clones, so I guess that this is the forbidden technique that Minato-sensei was talking about. However, she crouched down and put a hand behind her red stockings. Well, you seem to be eager to begin. However, take a word of advice. You'll be more successful with the 3 of you working together rather than attacking me individually. She grabbed a smoke bomb and threw it down to the ground before Naruto's clones had the chance of attacking. The Hyuga and Uchiha jumped backwards to avoid the cloud of smoke, whereas Naruto did not react as fast and was engulfed in the gray smoke. He coughed and attempted to fan away the smoke from his face with his hand. That's such a cheap trick. Even if you classified that as a cheap trick, it still worked, Naruto. Sasuke glanced over to the fading cloud of smoke before he ran off in search for Rin, obviously ignoring her last piece of advice. By the time Naruto had escaped the cloud of gas, he saw Sasuke running off towards the trees to the right of him. He dashed off, leaving Hinata behind. As Sasuke and Naruto, the purple-haired girl watched as her 2 teammates went in search for their sensei. She sighed softly. She suggested we worked as a team. She shook her head and rushed after her. Naruto wandered around the forest, kicking a pebble as he walked. Ah, great. I've lost sight of all 3 of them. He whistled as he looked up at the trees. However, his attention was quickly attracted down to a bush several meters in front of him. He quickly grabbed hold of his kunai and threw it at the bush. But nothing came out from a bush. Instead, Rin jumped down in front of Naruto from the trees. Your acting is terrible. Did you ever expect me to believe that you were lost? She got into an attacking stance, ready to ruin whatever plan Naruto had come up with. The Uzumaki looked up to the Jonin. Well, it still brought you put into the open. He put his hands behind his backs to make a hand sign that Rin wouldn't see. Several Naruto clones jumped out from every direction around Rin. Her eyes widened in shock. What? But how did you manage to create clones from different locations? She jumped backwards, kicking one of the clones down to the ground. Naruto crossed his arms and chuckled. I spent the last 5 minutes placing down sealed scrolls around this area, each with a clone sealed away. When I made a hand sign behind me, it wasn't to create shadow clones. It was to release the seal on the scrolls. I see. Rin stood still as she looked at the clones all around her. The next second, they had all disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Rin walked past the smoke and towards Naruto. The Uzumaki's eyes widened in shock. He never saw Rin move. So how was she able to defeat all of his clones at once? He gulped and took a step back as the woman stepped closer to him. The next thing Naruto sees is Rin walking past him. But how? She was several feet away a second ago. She smirked as she passed Naruto. Checkmate. I told you that you should have attacked me as a team. Naruto spun his body around to look at Rin. However, all his eyes saw was darkness heading towards him. It was as if someone had blocked the sun and the light was slowly disappearing from his eyesight. But the darkness wasn't only creeping its way towards Naruto. North, east, south, and west. Each side was slowly becoming submerged by the darkness and left Naruto in a small box of light. As the darkness crept up to the Uzumaki, his heart beat continuously increased. As soon as the darkness touched his foot, he felt a burning sensation appear on the parts of his body that were being dominated by the darkness. He let out a scream filled with pain and fear, which was the only way he could think of defending himself against this immortal enemy. He closed his eyes in fear of what was going to happen next. He felt a human touch on his shoulder, which made him open his eyes. The darkness was gone. He looked behind him and saw the Hyuga looking slightly worried at him. "Hinata, what happened?" "You were in a Jinjutsu." Hinata had her Byakugan turned on until Naruto asked the question. "I could tell because your flow of chakra was being interrupted." She pressed her index fingers together. She was shocked when she saw the large amount of chakra flowing through his body. It was as if he was receiving chakra from another person constantly along with his own chakra. The Uzumaki's eyes widened a little. "You can see my chakra? That's awesome." He chuckled before shaking his head. "I almost forgot about our task. Thanks for helping me out of that Jinjutsu there, Hinata." He turned around, ready to dash off and hope to find Rin. Wait, Naruto-kun." The purple-haired girl's face flushed red. "Don't you think we should try and team up to attack Rin?" Naruto turned back around to look at the timid girl. "Huh? Oh, but I'm sure I can defeat her myself now that I know how she attacks." Hinata wasn't so sure. She had a feeling that their Jonin teacher was just toying with them, and she probably had only shown a fraction of her skills. "I know, but we could at least try it. I mean, it's always useful to have support just in case you need it." He couldn't deny what Hinata was saying. If it wasn't for her, he would probably still be in that Jinjutsu. "I suppose you're right. I guess it won't hurt if we try to attack her together." Naruto grinned at Hinata and began to run. "Let's go, Hinata!" Naruto-kun." She pointed in the opposite direction where Naruto was going to run. "Rin is in that direction. I checked with my Byakugan earlier." The Jinchuriki blushed slightly as it had been the second time Hinata's teamwork had helped him. "Oh, then let's go that way." He chuckled and ran off in the other direction. Whilst Hinata and Naruto were traveling towards their sensei, she was in the middle of dodging all of Sasuke's attacks. Majority of the Uchiha's moves were predictable. It wasn't that his skill in taijutsu wasn't good, it was that his skill was limited. However, what happened next amazed the Jonin. She watched as Sasuke's eyes turned from a dull black to a blood red. "What? But how is that possible at such a young age?" Yes, his brother unlocked it at a young age, but Sasuke hasn't had to go through the pain and struggles of war. So what happened that made his Sharingan awaken? Sasuke was now able to see Rin's moves much faster and could predict which direction she was about to go to dodge his attack. However, Rin has had countless hours of training with two ninjas that posses the Sharingan, so she was able to trick Sasuke by starting to move in one direction but speed up quickly and move in another direction. Besides, Rin wasn't throwing many attacks at the Uchiha, so it was difficult for him to even try and counter her. Just when the situation looked hopeless for the Sharingan possessor, a ninja ran up behind Rin and thrusted her palm towards Rin. However, the Jonin had heard the footsteps of the ninja and knew that they were about to attack. She ducked to avoid the sudden attack from Hinata and jumped away for both of them. She faced both of them and smirked, "Nice try." The next thing that Rin felt was unexpected. She felt two pair of hands grab hold of her arms and hold them behind her back. She looked behind her, and her eyes widened in shock when she saw Naruto. She lowered her guard because she thought that he would have still been trapped. But how did he escape the Jinjutsu? The Jonin looked forward again and saw the two ninja in front of her. Sasuke held a kunai close to her while Hinata had her palm close to Rin's stomach. They didn't attack their Jonin as they felt that it would be wrong to do so while she was defenseless. "What are you doing?" Naruto exclaimed. "Attack her now, then we win." Rin chucked softly and looked at all three of them. "It seems you all have me cornered." She smiled sweetly. "You three will not go back to the academy. You all pass."